right, Sharon, so we're gonna go ahead.
Okay, you're live, Wendy.
Cool. All right, so we'll start off with our right to know meeting checklist. As chair of the planning board, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during the meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number, 603-236-4730, or by clicking on the website address, www.watervillevalley.org. B, we're providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing this meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided on the Town of Waterville Valley's website at www.watervillevalley.org. C, we're providing a mechanism for the public to alert this public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please call 603-236-4730 or email at townofwv@watervillevalley.org. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes are taken during this meeting shall be done by a roll call vote. So let's start with our roll call attendance. When you state your name, please let us know if any members of the public are there with you. As before, we'll proceed alphabetically. Nancy Knight, member. Mike
Capel, alternate.
Bill Larson.
I'm Bill Larson, member.
Myself, Wendy Rathgeber, member. John
Racine, member.
Rich.
Rich Rita, ex officio, and I am alone.
Bill Spence.
Bill Spence, member.
Terry.
Terry Wade, member.
Rob. Alrighty. So it looks like all of our full members are present, and we're mostly alone. So there we go. All right. Let's start off with reviewing the minutes of the previous meeting. Why don't we start with October 8th meeting? Has everyone had some time to review the minutes? Sadly, once again, they've come through without the numbering, it looks like. Any comments or corrections? Now, I had one little thing under committee reports for the town core group, the very last line there. MDCOTO advised to discuss putting the town trail on hold. There really isn't a town trail, so I'm not sure exactly what that's referring to. I don't know if anyone with better memory than myself remembers exactly what we were talking about at that point.
Isn't that the circumventing of the pond?
The pond. That was my first assumption.
That was my assumption.
Is there another trail? I don't think there is another trail.
Well, there's the village trail, but that's Levitt's Loop, I think, or Levitt Loop. Is that what we decided to call it?
Yeah.
So maybe we could
We'll say the pond/Levitt Loop.
we'll get used to terminology.
Wendy, I would make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Good idea.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Alrighty, so all in favor, Nancy,
Muted Nancy.
Approve.
Bill Larson,
Aye.
Wendy, yes, John,
Yes.
Rich,
Aye.
Bill Spence,
Aye.
Terry.
Aye.
Alrighty, and then moving on to the special meeting that we housed October 29th. Rather brief, but any comments there?
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve these minutes as well.
And I'll second it.
Guys are on a roll, excellent. All right, all those in favor, Nancy? Aye. Bill Larson,
Aye.
Wendy, yes, John,
John Racine, yes.
Rich,
Aye.
Bill Spence,
Aye.
Terry,
Aye.
excellent, all right. So, moving on. Well, normally I like to put the more onerous, bigger discussion things later. I think we should tackle the short-term, or continue our short-term discussion while we're all fresh. So Tara had sent us both the nice grid from what we wrote in last time, as well as updates. I assume everyone has received these and been able to review them.
It was pretty last, I didn't have time to work on it really till yesterday, so I don't really expect that everybody would have had a chance to study it last night or early this morning, but I sent it just in case.
Okay, well, at least everyone's received them.
We were all at it early this morning, Tara.
I wasn't, I was at it late last night, but
Good for you.
but I'm prepared to put both of these on the screen so we can look at them together.
Okay.
Fantastic.
You want to start with the table?
Sure.
I think that's the actually more difficult thing because sorry. I think it's the more difficult thing because it's what you're allowing where, and then the details of the language are actually a little bit easier.
And I know that I definitely sensed on the October 29th meeting that there was not necessarily consensus with this. So please, everyone, maybe I'll regret saying this, but everyone speak up if you're in disagreement or have alternate points to make. We definitely, this is a big topic and potentially could change some things. So we definitely we want to know where everyone's coming from.
All right, you should be looking at the table, yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
So, here's what, and I listened to the meeting, video. I'm finding that so helpful with some of these more detailed zoning discussions to have that Zoom recording later I actually was writing this while I listened to it again. So, it was super helpful, more helpful than my notes could have been really. So this is what I did with what came out of that discussion. Pretty much the same table, but a few tweaks to make it for zoning amendment like, right? It drives the zoning amendment. So there was continuing consensus at the last meeting that 1 or 2 rooms in a home could be an accessory use. But people talked about it being a business. So in my mind, well, it's probably be getting a permit for home occupation. When I looked at the home occupation section, it's not, and if Mark's listening, that's probably a question for you, is whether historically people have come in to get a permit for a home occupation, or it's just understood that they can do it because it's an accessory use. So I would add a statement that certain kinds of home occupations need a zoning permit, because you don't have any other way to enforce the parking, which was your main concern in that discussion about renting rooms out. Most communities, and this is why I did this, that most communities feel if I need to take in a lodger to pay my taxes, that's my business, and it's just a normal, historically normal accessory use of a dwelling, as opposed to go on Airbnb and kind of running a lodging business out of it. So I would articulate that that's an accessory use that's just fine and doesn't necessarily need that home occupation permit. We talk more about that.
Sorry, Tara, are you specifying that square that you were just talking about was for non-transient?
I separated the 1 or 2 rooms in an owner-occupied residence to transient and non-transient.
Okay.
Thinking that you may want to treat the transient more like a business.
Yes, I think that's.
Tara,
where
but wait. So if a non-transient means that they're renting it out by the month or whatever, if somebody is renting out a room for 6 months, isn't that still a business?
Well, that's for, I guess that's for you guys to decide. I mean, I separated it because I think most communities already have been allowing that as an accessory use. And it's more use as a vacation weekend place that's new.
And does that kind of stem from the impact of the immediate neighborhood, that, you know, transient people are in essence more impactful than someone who's there for the season, say?
I think it's a few things. I think it's that. I think it's like if you're gonna live somewhere, you tend to get the rundown on where the exits and park extinguishers are and all. It might be harder to regulate something that's historically been allowed as an accessory use of dwelling, right? Things become an accessory use because they've been going on for a while. And in this case, what we're talking about is residential versus transient. And I'm not sure you can regulate somebody's living arrangement like that, as opposed to when it's transient, it's not residential anymore. You know, all through your definitions of dwellings and dwelling units, we're talking about residential use. That's living somewhere, whether you're living alone or you have a larger long-term, or your uncle lives there and pays a little rent. That's still residential. But when it's transient, that's not a residential use of that dwelling anymore. So that's why we tend to draw that line of, you know, one is just another residential use of the residential dwelling. But when you are advertising the transient use, you've changed the use of that dwelling. That's how we look at it in terms of land use.
That makes sense.
I
Agreed.
think it makes a lot of sense.
I concur.
So the next thing was, well, what if it's more than 2 rooms? And so I did some reading to refresh my memory on I tried to, on where the building code draw that line, but of course there've been changes that aren't adopted yet and all that kind of thing. But the most kind of typical cutoff that I found was 5 or fewer guest rooms. And then what's gonna change possibly with different versions is how many total people in the building before you need different fire code standards. But if you go with 5 or fewer guest rooms, that gives a clear way for Chris to figure out which category it's in terms of the building code. And it also means they don't have, not that I'm encouraging people to not be accessible, but 5 or fewer, you don't need to be handicap accessible. So there's some clear cutoffs there for price. If you go with 5 or fewer guest rooms. You weren't, I don't think, all in agreement on this. This is where we landed, I think, at the end of the meeting in the table, was that it wouldn't be allowed in LDR, express exception in HDR, and we didn't talk about BC, but I was assuming it would be permitted in the BC because lodging is.
Yeah, I would assume VC, it would just default to being lodging.
I mean, I don't think you want to just, I think we're going to want to clean up the definitions of lodging so it's clearly something different than a bed and breakfast. So I think you'll want to add bed and breakfast to the VC at the student.
And that's assuming if everyone's good with going ahead with the bed and breakfast, which,
Right.
as Tara said, I don't think we're really in agreement with.
So I think you should talk about those things while we're in the table, not when we go to talk about the language. Right, I think this is the harder discussion. The language isn't so hard, but I think this is the harder discussion. So, you know, one thing that I would ask, and I think I put this question in the write-up, is or just a reminder that it will need site plan review. So if you make it a special exception, they've got to go through both boards in the HDR.
Agreed.
I don't think we have any bed and breakfasts or beds and breakfasts in town. Mike, did you find any in your survey?
No, we don't have any currently, but the importance here is that we can't just look at what we have. We have to look forward. Well, I guess the Snowy Owl, which now has breakfast, but I wouldn't call that a bed and breakfast. I'd call it a hotel.
Right, you got to make this 5 or fewer guest rooms.
Right. So that means, you know, Snowy Owl, for example, I guess has 77 and is serving breakfast. That's just a hotel. You know, the same thing would be true if the Valley Inn or whatever they now call it starts serving breakfast, because they do have a kitchen available.
I wouldn't. We're not going to talk about that they have to have breakfast either. It's going to be that they can is what.
Right.
No, how this is more typical is somebody built a big house when they had a big family, and they really want to keep it, but they don't have a big family anymore, and they need to generate income. That's the most typical scenario for a bed and breakfast.
And we.
Yeah, it just seems to me, regardless of the origin point of using a particular home or residence as a bed and breakfast, that you have crossed into a commercial line. Presumably you have a business ID, a tax ID, or you're maybe incorporated. You have standards you have to meet for food safety as well as guest safety. Insurance, I imagine, as well, that is business related, as well as the various permitting. So it seems to me that a bed and breakfast would clearly fall into a commercial enterprise and therefore should not be allowed in LDR as our current zoning exists.
Okay.
Why should it be allowed in HDR?
Well, a special exception, I think we're willing to consider it, but we don't have to. I mean, this is just a proposal at this point.
No, I'm thinking of if I lived in HDR, when I purchased that, I didn't think that there would be a bed and breakfast next door.
Well, except a lot of HDR is also condominiums, and I think, at least in my mind anyway, the thought of the impact on the neighborhood as far as traffic is sort of a deciding factor whether it should be allowed or not. So like with a condo, you have a lot of traffic potentially. And so that was my line of thinking.
Do we, I'm sorry, I'd forgotten. Tara, perhaps you can recall off the top of your head. Do we allow commercial activity in HDR?
Not off the top of my head, but I have the table here.
Yeah, thank you.
You allow some by special exception.
Okay, so that would fit.
Wait, can I?
So business offices, studios, retail stores are all a special exception.
Oh, I think Mark wants to say something.
Yeah, from an enforcement standpoint, how, if we are going to limit the HDR, how does that compare in the rental program for the condominiums in HDR as opposed to the condominium lodges like the Black Bear and the Golden Eagle?
So,
You
well, my recommendation would be this would only be single family homes for the bed and breakfast.
Well, that's not true in HDR.
So
Well, no, but I think, Tara, you're saying let's just focus on bed and breakfast for right now.
I guess I didn't understand that question because I don't know.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I thought you had moved from the bed and breakfast to the discussion about the commercial uses. If it's just bed and breakfast, fine. Sorry, I withdraw my question.
We're still on bed and breakfast, which I would recommend only being a single family home.
Okay, I agree. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agree.
Standard
And-
sort of definition, yeah.
Right.
And we're not thinking about bed and breakfast also as a subcategory of lodging business.
Or are we?
Well,
It would become one, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be permitted in the VC where you allow lodging and.
I'm still thinking of it as lodging business. But it wouldn't,
It would be somebody turning their large home into a lodging business
yes.
with up to 5 guest rooms.
But as far as the HDR is concerned, I'm with Wendy that it's no different than a condominium, townhouse condominium complex from either the traffic or the use standpoint. Because a lot of these condos are in rental programs, whether they're short-term or whether they're long-term. And so I think special exception would be fine in the HDR for bed and breakfast. Because you already have commercialized use of properties in the HDR.
If you have it as a special exception, you'll have two boards making sure
Right.
that there's adequate parking too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't see any problem with it from an enforcement standpoint being doable in the HDR.
I've kind of lost track as to how we got onto this path. If you can refresh my memory on it, does it have to do with this idea of changing the regulations the way they are now, which say no lodging in either LDR or HDR? The reason we're considering these changes is that so that to address the issue of the lack of short-term rental properties that the ski area needs to in order to do their business. Is that what this is all about?
I think it's, I mean, from my perspective as the planner, whether you talk about bed and breakfast or not, the big reason we're having the discussion is that a lot of people have turned their homes or their bedrooms in their homes into a business without the zoning ordinance saying they can.
But the zoning ordinance basically does say they can't because it doesn't allow that type of activity at this point.
Right, they're doing it even though the zoning ordinance doesn't say they can.
So if somebody, if there's a lot of people robbing banks, then instead of.
They are wearing masks, Terry.
That's right. But I mean,
Little levity.
I'm just curious about what we're driven by here, because I think we're kind of getting rolled into a situation where I think we've lost track of what it is that we're supposed to be trying to do. I really don't think that we should be changing these ordinances for the sole purpose of bending the law to meet what is happening.
Well, Terry, from a planning perspective, I feel strongly that if there's a piece of your regulation you're not enforcing for some reason, you need to change it. I want to see you enforce what you have, be comfortable enforcing what you have out of fairness to the person who lives next door to somebody who's doing it because they didn't ask, but they're a good doobie and they come in and ask if they can do it and they get told no. It just creates that unfairness.
Well, I don't think that's this case. I think it seems to be working relatively smoothly now. And if someone does come in and make a complaint, then at least you've got the law that says, okay, I guess we can do something about it. But if you manipulate the law, there's no longer that possibility. When the person comes in, you kind of say, well, tough, that's just the way the law is.
But what about the person who comes in and asks if they can do it, and you have to tell them no, because it's not allowed in the zone. But everybody around them's doing it.
Well,
They're
then,
not asking.
yeah, okay, well, then his complaint is, well, Joe Schmo is doing it, so why can't I? And then you say, well, if you want to make a complaint, and if he says yes, then you go out and pursue it. The fact that you're not enforcing the law doesn't mean it should be changed.
I think it's clarification, not change.
I don't agree with you, Terry. I think if everyone is breaking a particular law and no one is being hurt by it, that it's bad law and we need to fix it. Especially when the reality is that renting out 1 or 2 rooms in your home is becoming more and more popular, as well as bed and breakfasts are hopefully something that our town is going to get. So I think we need to regulate for it so that when we do get one, we know what to do.
I 100% agree with Nancy. I think Mike made the critical point here too, and that we need to be looking ahead. So this requires fixing. But I see it more of a clarification as opposed to a manipulation or even a fixing. We're just silent here, and it should be clarified. Going forward.
Right. Well, as speaking as someone, what we don't want to have is a situation where things are silent. We want to be definitive what we can and cannot do, what people can and cannot do, so that everybody knows upfront what's allowed, what's not allowed. Especially, 1 or 2 rooms in a house, yeah, that's one thing, although we had to clarify that. Anything that in any way is remotely a bed and breakfast, we have to be very clear where that is allowed and where it's not allowed.
And as a
I think to say we're silent on it is is not correct. I think that the zoning ordinance is relatively clear that if something is not listed, it's not permitted.
But people don't necessarily see it that way. I mean, who's going to buy a home in Waterville Valley and say, oh, let me read through the zoning and see what I can and can't do? You know, they're gonna be potentially in a pinch, say, oh my gosh, you know, COVID struck, I'm out of a job. What am I gonna do? Oh, people wanna come here. Let me open up a room. Oh, I put another room. Oh, what about a third room? And I think that's the type of thing we're just trying to make sure is clear.
And it's going forward too. I mean, I agree 100% with Nancy and Wendy. I'm sorry, Terry. I don't agree with you on this one. I think it's a small town too. I don't think we want to get in a position where someone who is a good citizen comes in and says, I want to do it, and we say, well, the zoning says no, but then they turn around and say, well, others are doing it. I don't think we want them then tell them, well, you need to complain. I don't think as a small town we want someone coming in and making that kind of complaint. That's not going to end well, I think.
It could end with an expensive lawsuit for the town.
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of people who even take the time to read an ordinance are looking for yes, no, permitted, not permitted,
Right.
and that the notion of silence leads to trouble.
And we're talking LDR. When people buy a home, their expectation is they won't have a commercial business next to them. Unless they're on the edge of course, of commercial.
I think the well-meaning is a Pandora's box that's going to come back and bite us later.
Yeah, and I think the box is already there.
You know, Terry, I think most other resort towns do regulate this, and I think it's something that we're missing. So I don't think it makes sense to not have a regulation just because we haven't had one before. I guess I'm unclear why you're resistant.
Because I think it's covered now, Nancy. To be honest with you, I don't think any of this belongs in LDR. I don't think that's what the intent was. HDR perhaps, but not LDR. And I think that it's already covered. It's plain and simple to me that it's not permitted. Now, the fact that people are doing it doesn't mean it's not covered.
I don't think we're looking to put it in LDR, are we?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Are you talking about bed and breakfast rooms in a dwelling? I think we're thinking through this whole thing as a entity, like the whole thing. And so I think it's a great way of making sure that we're not missing anything. I don't understand why you would want to pull LDR out and not include it in order to think through it.
I just don't think it should be run like a business. I'm looking at accessory use permit for home occupation for a transient residence. I mean, maybe this table is just a discussion table and that's not where it's going, but that's what I'm looking at now. And bed and breakfast, the same thing. I mean, we're just discussing bed and breakfast. Sounds to me like it's logic.
It is.
Right, and we're talking about, so yeah, bed and breakfast, we're talking about not allowing an LDR, but you're taking exception with 1 or 2 rooms on a transient basis in LDR?
Well, I'm looking at LDR transient and as listed here as an accessory use permit for home occupation.
So the 1 or 2 rooms, it's not the bed and breakfast, it's just 1 or 2 rooms.
Well, correct, but I would read that as being able to be a bed and breakfast, but maybe it doesn't qualify. I don't know. But I mean, just the fact that it's transient is, it's not like your mother-in-law apartment. It's not like, I think the intent when they made these regulations with regard to a 2-family residence or even a 2-family dwelling, I get confused between the two. But I think that it all intended to be long-term rentals, not transient.
I think today, with Airbnb, et cetera, I think we just need to consider it and think about it because I think people probably think, yeah, I'm allowed to do it. And I'm not sure that they shouldn't be.
Well, yeah, but just because it's there doesn't mean you should make it legal.
But if we regulate it, then we can, or if we make it legal, if we talk about it, then we can regulate it. We can make sure safety standards are in place. We can make sure parking's appropriate. all those other things that can be impactful, we can make sure they're not,
Yeah,
or minimizing.
we don't have any opportunity to check on the life safety codes right now. It's being under the radar.
Well, I won't belabor the thing. I disagree with you on this one, particularly in LDR. Perhaps HDR may be a little bit different, but that's just my opinion. So let the continuing discussion.
Well,
Terry, I kind of share your opinion that this whole exercise seems to me a solution in search of a problem. And I'm not sure what the problem is. And likewise, the same thing applies to parking. We have all these parking regulations, but we never enforce them. And it's, I don't know what you do about that.
We're doing something, we're trying to do something about it here, Bill. That's the point of this exercise.
so Bill Larson, how would you move forward on this?
Well, I likewise, I think there are, I know of one case where there was an individual that was renting more than one or two rooms in their house, and because they didn't have the money to pay for their mortgage. And so they saw it as an opportunity to kind of make some rental income. And I don't know why we're saying that you can't do that.
I don't think we are saying that you can't do that.
You can't do it right now, Bill.
You can't do it.
We're trying to make a way that you can.
Right.
It was
I don't-
illegal.
Are you in LDR?
It was illegal for them to do that if it was for transient use.
What if it,
Days or less, we're talking.
Sorry.
is he renting it transiently, Bill, or long-term?
They were renting it transiently.
30 days or less.
They were renting a room, a couple of days at a time to whoever. And it was different people, and it was not the same family in the same room, in the same house.
Yeah, your zoning doesn't allow that yet. That's why we were trying to do this.
And I think we would want to be able to, if someone buys a home, or a house, it seems like they ought to be able to do what they need to do with their property as long as it's not impacting their neighbors. And in my mind, one or two rooms rented shouldn't impact their neighbors.
I believe in this case, it was more than two rooms that was involved.
And that is why we want to regulate it.
But I think the core issue is that we're talking about activities that would change the character of the neighborhood. That is, if somebody started to change the way in which their residence was being used next door to your house in LDR, such that it, made you uncomfortable, it changed the nature of the neighborhood. What do you think would happen to the value of your property? And I think that's the core issue, and that we want to be able to stipulate what you can do and what you can't do.
Like Terry, I don't feel real strongly about this, but I don't know. It's just like we're in search of a solution to a problem.
Oop, you cut out, Bill.
Sorry, I'm saying I just get the feeling we're searching for a solution for a problem we don't have.
I think there's a really good chance you're gonna end up in court if you don't clarify it. Because this is today's way of vacationing for many people. And when people invest in property thinking that's okay because they're not land use law experts, they're gonna have a good case, I think.
But it's great to have all this discussion. Not to put you on the spot, John, I assume you're still here. You kind of slid off my screen. I think we've heard from everyone but you. Do you want to chime in, John?
Yes, I think we should regulate it. Bottom line, done. That's my final offer.
Thank you for your conclusion.
Can I throw out one question? there's some discomfort with allowing somebody in LDR to rent 1 or 2 rooms for transient occupants. Would it be better to have that be a special exception? So that they could look at screening and so forth.
Not for me.
No. Well, no.
I wonder what it is that makes us think that if we pass some sort of regulations, that we'll be able to enforce the regulations any more than we can enforce the current law.
I feel like that's a different question than creating the regulations.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think we have regulations, well, last year, maybe longer than that. We created regulations on lighting, but we've done nothing about it. And I agree with Nancy, it's a different matter altogether.
But for the lighting, I mean, everybody who has the lighting now is grandfathered. You will enforce it when you have a site plan that proposes lighting.
Okay, I understand.
Same with your new parking regulations. You don't go backwards to do it.
So some of the problems I think we have in this town, and Rich, maybe you can shed some light on this, is doesn't the select board work on enforcing these laws? It's not really the planning board, it's for us to recommend or suggest to the select board, and then the select board takes over from that. Is that correct, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's essentially the process as I understand it through the enforcement officer. And my presence here is a way for the planning board and the select board to coordinate so that I bring this to the select board. For example, I thought, hey, the planning board is creating a situation that's going to be very difficult to enforce. So the short answer to your question is, as I understand it, yes.
The planning board role is to recommend zoning to town meeting, and the select board's role is to enforce it. There isn't really any official role on a kind of case by case basis.
And I think that
Let
it
me
would be,
just ask a technical question. If we go ahead and enact this, are existing homes in LDR exempted from the regulations?
No, because if they've been in violation, something in violation doesn't get grandfathered. They would need to come in for this permit. You're not grandfathered by breaking the law, ever.
I think it would be a very useful process to present something like this at town meeting and see what the reaction is.
Well, that will be a warrant, but public meetings ahead of time to discuss it.
Okay.
But I think that's what you're deciding today is whether
Right.
there's enough consensus to do that for this coming town meeting.
Right. And
Yes.
I definitely don't want to rush anything, especially if we still need to work through. But perhaps it's worth continuing on with our process for today and see where we end up.
And,
Well,
you know,
what I need to say is,
it doesn't be an all or nothing either.
True.
Right? You may have some parts of this that you're comfortable having a public hearing and hearing public input as a next step and going from there to decide whether it goes on the warrant.
Right.
And there may be other parts that you, like the bed and breakfast, that, well, let's just keep talking about that for next year, for the following year. But if there are pieces there's agreement on, we can go forward with that much. Just, have a public hearing next month and see what the public's response is to a piece of it. Just encourage you not to think of it as an all or nothing.
Yeah.
True.
because I think the answer to Bill and Terry's questions lies in the reaction from the public.
Yeah, right.
You know, the-
That's the next step, is to do a very well advertised public hearing. But I'm highlighting bed and breakfast, because so far it sounds like that's the.
Well, and also it sounds like the transient in LDR of any
Yes,
type, right? Sounds like
agreed.
picking point.
Yeah, I mean, there's two big advantages to insisting on a permit for any of these, which is one, safety, and two, the town can make money depending on how we set up the permit. I looked at some other towns, and you know, maybe we won't make as much money as they do, but you know, it is one way for the town to do that if we have a lot of this going on.
Nancy, were you also looking at the towns that have done business permits as opposed to zoning permits for them? There's a couple that the models have been, their examples have been going around, like Laconia, where the select board do it as a business permit, and that helps with enforcement. But the zoning has to allow it first.
Yeah, actually, I was looking in California because I was actually considering doing it with some property there, and yeah, they were all business permits.
Yeah, and that step would have, obviously the select board can't have a business permit for something the zoning doesn't allow. So this, because I have another client that's considering, where the select board's considering doing a business permit if this is adopted at town meeting, but they can't right now, even though they know what's going on.
So we don't actually specify like permits for bed and breakfast under HDR, VC, and C1. Is that just because we're assuming that they need business permits?
They would need to come for a zoning permit and site plan review under the current arrangement of your regulations.
So we would qualify bed and breakfast as commercial. And
So it would need site plan review, but
right.
I wanted to articulate that the other would need the other kind of home occupation would need a zoning permit, because I'm not sure that people are coming in now for a zoning permit for home occupation. But I think there are, in my mind, if customers are coming on site or employees, that should come in for the permit, so you can look at the parking and.
What's the difference between a business permit and a zoning permit?
Yeah, good question.
A business permit is adopted by the select board under a different statute.
So are you saying that the question of business permit is not the business of the planning board?
Correct. You can, if something passes and it's now allowed in the zoning, you could make the recommendation to the select board that they consider a business permit, and here are some examples you like.
And if the select board did not take that up, then would we automatically have a zoning permit?
Or you could have a zoning permit anyway,
Okay.
but I've gotten two different opinions from two different municipal attorneys about the idea of the select board having a business permit for the short-term rentals. One felt that if we're gonna have a business permit for lodging, really needed to be all lodging, the hotels, the condos, and the private homes. And the other said, well, maybe if you define it as a different use, you could do it differently. So you just want to consult with your own kind of attorney before you went down that path.
Help me refresh my memory here. Do we issue zoning permits in any case?
Yeah.
Yes, we have a site plan review process, Bill. That's what you're referring to, right, Tara?
No, if somebody wants to build something, they need to go get a permit, right?
Well, we have a building permit.
But as part of that process, you're reviewing whether it meets the zoning.
That's correct. Yes.
It's really a zoning and building permit. You just haven't named it that.
Right. So
The
yes,
zoning ordinance makes clear that to do anything, you need to go get a permit from the select board.
that's correct. And we do that for every building or new building or change of use or whatever, and Chris reviews it.
But what I think it might be a hole in there is the home occupation.
Yes, home occupation, if we had an attorney come into town and Chris noticed that there was now, somebody had literally hung out a sign and said CPA, Joe Smith CPA or Joe Smith attorney at law, and they hung it on their home or at the end of their driveway, he would question them and they would have to get a permit.
So what I'm suggesting is it might be better to be proactive about that and clarify in the zoning ordinance what kinds of home occupations does somebody need to come get a permit for?
Oh yeah, no, I agree that this table is a much easier way to lay that out as it relates to this short-term rental stuff. I agree. I think it'll make it much easier on Chris, but we do have a system in place to do the permitting.
Well, after the fact, it sounds like. I'm just suggesting that you add some language to the zoning ordinance to tell people they need a permit for one.
Sounds like that makes sense.
So that's kind of the next page when you guys have some sense of where you want to go with any of it. That's on the other page that
Well, should we keep working through the rest of the chart and just see we have those parts highlighted and know that they're potential issues? But as Tara said, perhaps there are other things that we would feel comfortable moving forward with, so.
Wendy?
Yeah.
It's Mike. I'm a take on a problem person. I think this line of the spreadsheet is clearly the single most important line. And I think what we should do is take a vote whether or not we want to discuss this line at all. Because I think there are, I don't mean to pick on Terry, but there are people that fall into Terry's camp and there are people that don't fall into Terry's camp. Let's make a decision whether or not we want to take it on at all, which I guess is the question that's being batted around.
When you say take it on,
Well, in other words, the question of bed and breakfast and where it's appropriate and where it's not appropriate, which is what we've been discussing for the last 15 or 20 minutes. Let's make a decision whether or not we want to take on the question of a bed and breakfast and where, or just say, okay, we're going to leave this as an open discussion and come back to it at the next meeting, which I think is kind of what you're saying.
well, if you come back to it at the next meeting, then we're not having a public hearing. And what I'm just suggesting that if there are things that we want to move forward with for a public hearing, this is our morning to suss that out.
Okay.
We just don't want to see us get too hung up on one issue or another and not find out that there's something we could move forward with.
Right, why not see if there's a bundle of things you agree on having a public hearing on and leave the others behind to talk about next year?
I would be against that. I think we should just have the discussion and vote on it. Let's move forward. Another year, I don't want this hanging over. My own personal opinion is we got enough other things to deal with. Why do we need to wait another year? If we have majority agreement, then we move forward. If we don't, we don't. I guess I'm agreeing with Mike, except I'm bringing it a little bit further. Let's not vote to discuss it. Let's vote to decide what we want to do at the end of this.
As a planner, just to have a little red flag in my head when I hear you talking about pushing forward a zoning amendment that doesn't have the consensus of the board. You have a few months that people will be talking to each other, and you want the board to all be behind what you're doing. I'm a process person. I mean, it's
Well-
in your policy. That's just my planner.
Consensus, I hear you, Tara, but consensus in that definition gives any one or two people the ability to block any movement.
It does. I mean, and consensus doesn't mean everybody loves the whole thing either. It means everyone can live with what you land on.
Right, and let's just put it to the people.
So I think that you want to be careful that what you're suggesting is to have a public hearing and see, right? That's what I hear you saying, Rich, that the vote would be to see if you at least want to get public input on these things and then decide whether to put it forward.
No, not quite. I'm saying let's, as a planning board, decide through a vote what we feel comfortable going forward with, and then we'll get public input.
So you're suggesting, say,
Let's
we
do it.
would determine whether or not transient occupations in LDR is something we should allow or not, like that type of thing, and whether bed and breakfasts.
Yeah, let's make a decision as a board. And then put it to out for a public hearing, we'll get input, and we can decide at that point what changes, if any, we want to make to how we want to craft the warrant.
It still seems to me that if we want to do that, then we should continue working through the chart.
Yes, I agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, you'll need to get through the chart and the language on these.
Right.
On the page.
Right.
You can't have a public hearing on the chart. The chart is how I would then revise the language. So,
I would like to continue working on the chart. That's why we're here. I just had a question. Does NA under C1 mean not allowed or not applicable?
not applicable because there aren't single family homes allowed in C1.
Okay.
All right, John Racine here, hi. What about condominiums? What about NA there?
No, not my recommendation. My recommendation is single family dwelling.
No, NA is because they're not allowed in LDR,
Is that what that means?
right? Multifamily.
Not applicable. You don't have single family dwellings allowed in C1.
Well,
The
he's looking
other
at the
one.
end with multifamily dwellings and condominiums and LDR.
Oh, we haven't gotten to that. I don't see that part of the chart.
We're
Oh, like gone down too far? Okay,
we're still talking about rooms in a dwelling in the top half.
Yeah.
okay. All right, sorry, I went a little too far, okay.
Too quick, Rush, John.
So let's continue on then. And then we can recap at the end of the chart anyway.
All right, so let's do the next bottom half of it. So that was rooms in a dwelling. This is the whole dwelling unit. This is what, so if you look at the table from the last meeting, I put accessory in here because you all agreed, there was total consensus I heard on being able to run out your dwelling transient use in HDR and BC. But then I thought more about it and said, well, it's not really appropriate to talk about that as an accessory use. If it's the primary use, it's not accessory to residential anymore. So I think the right way to handle that would be to make a use and define it, call the short-term rental, and have it be permitted in those districts. So that's why it looks a little different than we talked about. It can't be accessory if it's the primary use.
Tara, I just want to clarify, so under dwelling units, in essence, all four of these examples are transient, correct?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. You can't regulate.
Well, you specified it up top, so I and it's not specified down below, so I just want to be clear.
Yeah. I think renting rooms in a home is a little more, something that somebody might have a question about, rather than renting out the building.
So yeah, so for HDR, so you're saying transient rental of a single family dwelling, say, in HDR. You're saying we just make that's a use, we define it, and then make it permitted?
That's what I heard the consensus, that's where I heard the consensus the last meeting, that in everything, except the LDR, it would just be permitted.
Okay, does anyone have an issue with the HDR section, the dwelling units being permitted in HDR?
Is that not what is happening now?
Regardless of whether it is or not.
It's true, it may be happening now, but the question is, should it be happening now?
Well, I understand that.
Move forward.
But
So is that how everyone sees the best way to continue, to allow continuation or to move forward?
I think it makes perfect sense. People do it with their condominium units, and so I really don't see why someone in that same zone couldn't do it with their house.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Okay,
So then you want to focus on the LDR column.
I think LDR is going to be our sticking point
yes,
across the board.
And where the consensus was at the last meeting was that you had a single family dwelling in the LDR, you'd talk about some number of days that would discourage someone from buying a single family dwelling in LDR for that purpose. But that would allow somebody who has one to, you know, if it's a vacation home, they rent it out this season, they're not using it, so forth. And then
attempting to reach you on your cellular device. A hot babe is
Sorry.
attempting to reach.
and you all Zoom bombed by the former chair.
With a hot seat.
Yeah. So, and you also had said, if in the kind of in-law apartment kind of arrangement, if the owner was occupying one of the dwellings, they could apply for a home occupation to use the other side for income generation. That's what the consensus was last time.
are you making the distinction between longer term and transient here?
This is all transient.
Right.
That's what he was asking. So this entire section under dwelling unit would be for transient.
You don't need to talk about longer term. That's allowed. That's a
happening now.
residential use of a dwelling. Nobody's questioning that that's a residential use of a dwelling.
Right, yeah, this is all transient. So, sorry, so the ADU, why don't we start with that one? Because that seems a bit more clear cut. Does anyone have an issue with how Tara's broken it out here?
Nancy, you're muted.
If you're allowing someone to use your ADU but not charging them, do you need a permit? I mean, on a temporary basis?
It would seem as though then it's not a business, right?
Right, that would be the ultimate mother-in-law suite, which I think is,
We're gonna
No.
call it rental for transient use, right?
right.
But it's an important distinction.
Right, so so specifically, all of this is where money is exchanging hands.
Yeah, it's all rental.
Transient rental.
Maybe those words should appear somewhere.
They will. That's the other page they haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah.
We're not gonna put this table in the zoning ordinance. We're gonna write words that make it happen.
I like, kind of like the table.
I do too.
Much
So that-
easier to understand.
So it seems as though our biggest thing, I remember we had a discussion on that perhaps, Mike, you were maybe gonna ask some, was it maybe the realtors? If there were.
Yeah, but I mean, the biggest issue is that, if you talk to the realtors, right now, there's nothing available. But we know that this is going on through Airbnb and word of mouth and everything else.
No, I'm sorry, I should have been more specific. As far as the numbers of cumulative days per calendar year for the single family, you know, that it would be allowed as long as it were less than, to discourage, say, corporations from coming in and buying up swaths of homes to be able to rent them.
Yeah, but when we were talking about it, we're talking about transient, which we were talking about being basically weekend people.
Right, but where we had left it off at our last discussion was under the single family dwelling for LDR, that whether the extent to which it was allowed would be dependent upon keeping it under a certain number of calendar days per year.
But that's a business question. That's not a.
Right, and I guess in my
That's
notes, I had
Okay,
that,
but to try to move things along, if we're trying to make the distinction between, well, a business, which is one of our dividing lines in this entire discussion. So I propose that we let X equal 90 days.
where's everyone else's thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I had to take a phone call. Tara, is 90 days, is that what you had recommended earlier?
No, I hadn't thrown out a number. I think it is a question.
I don't think Tara made a recommendation.
You need to ask, my recommendation would be to ask local real estate experts.
Right.
If he had a client who was looking for a place to buy, what would be the deal breaker for them if that's what they wanted to do with it?
Right,
So 90 days would be like a summer almost, like someone wanted to come in and rent a house for the summer.
And use it themselves in the winter, yeah.
Right,
That's probably a typical scenario.
right.
or the other way around.
Or vice versa.
Someone's looking for purely investment, which I think was our bigger concern,
Yes.
is to prevent that pure investment. So 90 days would not encompass a full winter of a rotating door.
And it makes it look and feel more like an accessory use,
Right,
which is what you're trying to do in the LDR, is make sure that the single family dwelling stays more residential than the.
I think 90 days would work. We certainly can get input in public hearing as to the precise number, if 90 days is not acceptable.
Right, and hopefully you'll be on track to have a first hearing in December, so you could have a second one in January to make any decisions that you decide after hear from the board, or drop any pieces. You can.
I can live with 90 days.
My understanding is you can drop pieces of something without having another hearing too.
right.
Do I understand it correctly that what that means is that this is transient, and as long as the total number of days it's rented during a year is less than 90, then it's acceptable, even though there's short-term, like 2 or 3 day rentals?
I would recommend wording it offered, not rented. Offered.
Well, that gets back to a tax, that's the tax concept also. It's not only that it's done, it's offered.
That's why I put that word in. I think
The offer
I
is
agree
there.
with I agree with that.
But bottom line, Terry, yeah, that's the idea. So it's still looking at LDR with transient business in a single family dwelling.
Yeah, but the purpose of the 90 days is to discourage someone from buying a house to do this.
right.
For strictly that reason, yes.
Yes.
So it's an interesting thing to compare renting transiently a single family dwelling in LDR versus 1 2 rooms in LDR.
Would it make sense to vote on this half? Or Rich was pushing for the whole, or,
Carpe diem.
Why don't we continue to work through the table and decide after?
I think we're almost through it.
so.
It looks like we're
wanna
getting
go back up to these sticking points then?
I mean, I think from what I'm hearing, LDR just in this column is the biggest question mark as far as whether the exchange of money, basically the creation of businesses, or whether you define any of this as strictly business, therefore not allowed in LDR. Is that one of the bigger sticking points for you, Terry?
Yeah, right, at this particular point, I wouldn't vote for anything in LDR as a change, no.
As a change?
As a change from what already exists.
So you would not allow accessory use in LDR for renting rooms?
At this point, yes, that's correct. That doesn't mean you can't do it, it's just, that's my opinion.
Well, it does mean you can't if you don't allow it. I think that's the issue. So right now you're saying someone who has a home in LDR cannot rent out a room.
Not legally.
Right, and you would,
I mean, I walk every day and I see a lot of cars that drive 25 miles an hour and I see some that drive 35 and some that drive 60. And they're not all caught. And some of them just take the chance and some of them have good reasons, I'm sure, for doing what they're doing because they've got to get to a doctor's appointment or something like that. Still, the law is 25 miles an hour. And we somehow seem to muddle through and everything works out all right. And I think the same is true of this.
I don't want to muddle through, Terry. I would prefer clarity if we have an opportunity. And yeah, I wouldn't argue by analogy too much.
Yeah, I would flip the script and say, what do you think the 60-mile-an-hour cars would do if there wasn't a posted 25-mile-an-hour speed limit? They'd be doing 100.
Well, there would be a complaint from some of the local walkers, such as myself, and hopefully they'd be arrested.
Or someone could complain that they're being treated differently and the town is open for a lawsuit. I think that's something we want to close out.
Well, I guess my point is, then what do? Do you alter the law to say, well, if you are late for work, then you can go 45? This is what you're getting into. You're getting into some special situations.
I wouldn't argue by
No,
that.
I think you are. we're very specific.
Well, you can have it for a certain number of days, for certain days out of the year, and you can have certain rooms rented for a short period or long period. And depending on the definition, it might be bed and breakfast, it might not. It's just when you get into all these little tentacles, it's not as simple as it is now.
but it would provide clarity.
I think it's pretty clear to say if it's not mentioned, it's not permitted.
I don't find that reasonable because so many people read the documents pertaining to what they can do and what they can't do, looking for an answer. And if the answer is not there, they are more than likely assuming that they can rather than they cannot.
I'm not responsible for the misreading of the law. It's very
This is how people behave.
But Terry, I think we're also saying not just that we don't like the idea that it's not mentioned and it's something that's growing, but that we think that it should be an accessory use and permitted, and therefore we need to make a regulation.
Okay, well, this is the difference, Nancy. I think you hit the point right there. It's not so much the matter that you're saying, it's not clear. You're saying we want to allow it. That's what you're saying. And I don't. So I guess that's the difference.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Nancy because I think, if I picture someone who's fallen on hard times, who's been a resident here in Waterville Valley for, 20 years, fallen on hard times, they really, in order to keep their home, their roof over their heads, they need to rent out a room or two. I think we should allow it.
Well, I think that's it's a nice thought, but it's right from the heart. And you could count on one hand probably the number of people that would fall into that situation in Waterville Valley. In single family homes in LDR.
I mean, I agree with you, Terry. It's perhaps not a great idea to argue by creating some kind of regulation or law through exception or example. What's that old saying about those sorts of things make bad law in the end? But I think trying to get our hands around something that is already going on and trying to provide some clarity in the sense of allowing people to do what has been going on, so there is no confusion. I think the gravamen of your point is correct. We are trying to, as Nancy said, we are trying to change this so that what's happening now will be allowed, but in doing so, we're trying to create the parameters of what is allowed rather than what's happening now, which is people are doing it illegally and we have no parameters.
I don't think, just like my example before, I don't think it happens very much of the time in LDR in single family homes. I think it happens a lot in HDR with condos.
You may be right, but again, we're looking towards the future as well and where the market is going.
I don't know how many, there may be a couple, but when you're talking about $1.5 million home, soon to be $2 million, the way things are going in Waterville Valley, there aren't that many people that really need to rent out their homes to help pay the mortgage.
But what about 10 years from now when who knows what's going to happen to the market?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they'll have their mortgage paid by then.
I don't know.
It's our job to come up with, we're supposed to be looking forward, not at what's happening now, even though the address what's happening now, but also looking forward.
I'll also offer the point that all you need is one incident. You need one fire, one, who knows,
Car crash.
yeah, a drug party. Something happens where the town then erupts and looks to the boards to say, why didn't you do something about this?
Because it was a non-permitted use, very clearly in the zoning ordinance.
Why weren't you enforcing it?
Well, that's up to the town. It's not up to the planning board. And if we have to change all the zoning laws to conform to what's actually happening, well, why even bother? Because then, whatever is going to happen is going to end up with a law that says it's okay.
I don't think we're doing that, Terry, but may I suggest perhaps we're not going to change your mind on this and we decide as a board what we'd like to do on this issue, if not right at this moment, but at some point, if we have another issue to discuss here.
Yeah, I mean, I see this analogy as like trying not to let people use their personal cars to drive for Uber. I think that, the world is changing. People are using their personal homes and, 20-somethings, 30-somethings and saying, yeah, you know what? We're having a kid. They cost $500,000 over their lifetime. We know that the facts. Let's rent out 1 or 2 rooms and make some money while we can. And that's just the way the world's going. I don't think we should shut our eyes.
Yeah. That social media has changed all of this. It made these things so easily done.
So Tara, would you think that we work through some of the other changes before looking where we want to go, or should we decide how we're moving forward first?
I was thinking, and I was looking at the calendar, if you could come to terms on this table, whether you decide to keep trying to talk Terry into it or take the yellow out or vote on it. And I might suggest that you continue the meeting for next Thursday morning at 8 and talk about the text on the other page then, and that will give me a chance to kind of relook at that with this discussion in mind. And you'd still have time to use your regular December hearing date, because I know you have some other things to do, and I just don't want to see you hurrying through what would be the language of the zoning amendment.
Yes, let's move on to the language. And that I'm interested in presenting this to the public to see what reaction we get.
Right, but I think
No, I was just suggesting that you might need another meeting to be ready to do that, but I can keep going as long as I can outlast all of you. I'm at my own desk, I'm comfortable, I have water.
yeah, I think I agree with you that we probably will need another meeting. I will not be available next Thursday.
Well,
But-
you want to see where you're at on these things,
Yeah.
like pulling the board.
Yeah, so,
Okay, one question is, does the LDR ordinance now say lodging is not permitted?
Yes.
Okay, so then bed and breakfast is just a special case where we're attempting to clarify because of the use of the term bed and breakfast. It's so familiar that we want to identify it as a special item.
well, but it still would not be allowed in LDR.
Right. Yeah, that's understood.
Right. You had just talked at the last meeting about considering allowing it in HDR as a special exception.
Yes.
But can I ask a question on what would be the basis of allowing it in HDR as special exception? Why would you look, what would you look at?
Well, you'd look
Single
at,
family home?
all the things you listed,
Parking.
so that the zoning board is charged with saying it's an appropriate location, it won't adversely affect property values, noise, traffic, lighting, no nuisance or hazard and stuff. The list is already in there for special exception.
Yeah, it's kind of consistent with how HDR is at the moment and in our regulations. Does that make sense, Bill?
No, I hear the list and that's fine with me.
Okay, so how do we best move forward? Why?
Hey, I have a question, sorry. Tara, this might be for you to help me understand, and I'm sorry I have to do this, but I'm going way down the bottom to the townhouse and condominiums. I'm not clear on that at all. Can you help me with that? LDR-NA means,
If they aren't, those are in LDR.
Duplexes and multifamily aren't allowed in LDR, so the fact
it's not,
that
wait a
how
minute.
presented would be
wait a minute, NA means not allowed, is that correct?
not
Not
applicable. Yeah, not, whether you say not applicable or not allowed doesn't really matter.
But not applicable is probably the easiest thing. We're not saying that it's not allowed, it's not applicable because those items are not allowed.
Right, that's what I was thinking when I typed it.
Yeah.
Not applicable.
And the HDR, it's permitted use only? Is that what that means? You need to get a permit to do it?
No, it's
No.
allowed. It's
Like
a
every
permit.
other permitted use, it's allowed.
It is allowed.
It's allowed, but you need permits to do it.
No, it's permitted. It is permitted.
Okay,
Not permitted, but permitted.
I wouldn't see them needing to come in for a change. I wouldn't expect them to come in for a change of use. For that.
okay, and is this gonna be up for discussion in the next meeting?
But I don't think you've decided yet whether you're gonna, we'd need to look at the other page to decide what's going on public hearing. I don't think you've decided whether you need another meeting yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what we're sort of at that point of figuring out how to move forward.
That's what we're thinking about, okay?
Yep.
So this list is not finished, is that correct?
The chart we've discussed, the list of definitions we haven't started on yet.
Okay,
But we want to vote on the chart, is that correct?
I think it would be helpful, yeah. I mean, I can't follow up and do revisions to the language to vote on the chart.
Right. So,
You know what, I wasn't clear on what John just said. I had assumed permitted use means you need a permit. Isn't that correct?
I thought we had talked to allowed, permitted being allowed.
Permitted as in the zoning language, you permitted, not allowed, special exception. Not a permit, as I understood it.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we wouldn't require a permit for some of these, but that would be allowed.
so I could just rent it out and without even discussing it with the town or anything. I can do that.
My guess is all the people who are doing it have not come and gotten a new zoning permit.
That's correct.
They're not really, they're not doing anything that would require site plan review. They'd be exempt from site plan review under.
And my
Again,
interpretation. Go ahead.
The benefits of regulating this are safety, being decent to the neighbors, which means making sure that the parking is sufficient, et cetera. And also, paying the town for making sure that all this is going on. And so I think we need a permit if you're gonna do short-term rentals in all cases, don't you?
I do.
Have we defaulted to the homeowners associations on this?
I think some of it will. The way I had taken it was that we had just decided that this column under HDR was allowed and that we'd be looking at permits, breaking down the fine details next, as far as what would need a permit and what would not.
Right. Right, we're just trying right now, but it would be helpful to, while we're in the table, I think, to get a sense of which ones you want people to come in for a site plan review or a home occupation permit. It's not really a home occupation when we're down here, right? It's more like they need site plan review.
Can we go back? Somebody just mentioned parking. So for example, in HDR, it's what, 2 parking spaces per unit, correct?
Something like that.
So if you're renting things out, don't you need more than 2 parking spaces for that unit?
Why? You're not there anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't see how it could need more parking. The bottom half of the table.
Renting the whole.
I mean, the number of beds stays the same, and like with the lodging, it's based on number of beds. So
And you're renting the whole unit out, Mike, so you would not be there.
That's why I had a permit for home occupation up here. Because you're still there. So you need to make sure there's somewhere for them to park. But down here, you're gone.
Yeah, but
So
so,
top don't we have to talk about parking?
so something that, in addition to what Mike's saying is, and this is from experience, we see people come in renting it and the homeowner is gone, but the people who are renting it have 4 or 5 people that come in and there's 3, 4, 5 cars.
which is probably why we need to circle back to the permitting.
Let's talk about that when we get to the other page.
Okay,
So we know that we will be addressing parking in the permitting, where we need to require permitting. But for now, let's just focus on how we're gonna move ahead, if we're gonna move ahead.
Right.
Good.
Well, to get to those questions, do we agree with this and deal with them?
Right, we don't wanna deal with the details if we don't, so we're talking about just the broad brush strokes right now. If we agree with moving forward and working out the details further along. And mostly just because we're under a time constraint, so we need to be efficient here. So Tara, I think you'd suggested perhaps we break them up by rooms in a dwelling versus dwelling units. Break them up that way, or do we look at breaking them up by zoning?
Whatever you want.
I would vote on the whole table perhaps to see if we have agreement. If not, we can break it down separately and see where we do agree.
Okay, we'll start that way.
Just a recommendation.
Well, if someone feels like making a motion, I guess we could go forward with however that person feels.
All right. This is Rich. I move that that the planning board vote to determine if the table presented in front of us on our screen here is acceptable to the board for going forward in changing the zoning and working on the specific language in the second page. Did that cover it?
I think that was well stated. Do we have a second?
Second motion.
Okay, so all those, so this is, we're saying yes or no to whether or not we agree that this represents how we want to move forward. Right? Everyone in favor of that? So Nancy,
Yes.
Bill Larson,
I'm gonna abstain. I really don't understand these issues.
okay. Wendy, yes. John,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Bill Spence,
Yes.
Terry,
No.
that was no.
That's a no.
Okay. So the majority of the board wants to move forward with this as it is. So that means we'd probably not be completely wasting our time working out some details and see if perhaps in working through the details, we can find a way to build some consensus. Does that make sense?
Plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you believe while I've been sitting here, I lost my paper copy of this. So I
No.
just have to print it again to make notes on it. So, I can't swear that this is fully cooked because I didn't really have a chance to work on it till yesterday. But I think it's good enough for discussion, and if there was consensus, maybe we'd get close enough. We'll see. There's a possibility we'd get close enough that I could make some changes and send it out to planning board members individually to see if it jives with your recollections of what the board asked, and go from there without another meeting. But let's see. So the first thing I thought about, and I'm assuming you're all seeing this now, the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Yeah.
learned to check because when I do it another way that's supposed to work, it doesn't always. I think the first place we need to look is the definition section. So this is all things for the definition section. What I'll do with the table is make changes to the use table that you have in the zoning ordinance now. We won't make a new table. We'll add some things to the table that you already have so that people have it all in one place. So I would do that with the discussion. But we'll also need to change some definitions. And something that occurred to me while we were having this discussion earlier was, they don't really say accessory use anywhere in the definition. You have things listed as accessory uses, but you only have a definition for accessory building. So I think you need to expand that to be accessory use or building. And then you'd add here the things that you've agreed to be included in an accessory use.
Should that be made two definitions, Tara, one for accessory use and one for accessory building?
That was exactly what I was gonna say, Terry.
You could, either way is fine. If you'd rather do that, I'll make a note to do that.
I think as far as searching and finding, it would be better.
Okay. So. I would circle back to the table and make any changes you made there and, make sure this goes with it, but in my mind, you'd articulate which things you've decided to make an accessory use. I would add a new definition for bed and breakfast.
Sorry, when you say articulate the things that can be used for accessory use, you mean like across everything? Like,
No, just the topic that we're dealing with, that people are unclear,
for the transient, okay.
you know. So I'd add it. Bed and breakfast. A new definition.
Tara, I have a question.
I had a question
And-
first.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Nancy.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Steve.
All right, my question was, is it that breakfast is the only full meal they can serve, and they can only serve it to guests? Because that's not exactly what I'm reading, but they can also serve snacks and wine in the evening and like a little, you know what I mean? Because bed and breakfast always serve like an afternoon tea sometimes and
Cookies and tea at 4 o'clock.
yeah. So it's that may serve breakfast dash only to guests. It's not clear.
So this was just a really rough first draft for you to help you think about what you want to say. It's not really ready for wordsmithing, but if you tell me what you want to allow, then I can apply some words to it. I can't make up words when I don't know what you want to allow. So this is just really for discussion. So how usually, so a bed and breakfast definition typically says it includes breakfast, but I don't think that's really what people are trying to do. You're really trying to say a lodging home, a residential lodging use of home.
Right, as opposed to a rooming house, what you're saying is that the only full meal that can be presented is breakfast.
Right.
Doesn't say anything about snacks or other provisions.
Right, they might give you a box lunch.
I don't know, I've been at bed and breakfast where they've offered dinner as well. I think the key provision is food is only offered to guests.
Yeah, that's what I think is the critical element, not that
Okay,
we should restrict what they serve.
That's your decision. I think you want to call it an inn then. Because that's usually in land use terms, for some reason, we think of it as an inn if they can have dinner, but a bed and breakfast, if it's breakfast and here's your box lunch and we'll have wine and cookies when you come back. And then you grow into, well, can they have events there? Because if they have a full kind of dinner kitchen, then yet opening that door to, can they have a wedding? So you want to be thinking about all those things in the definition.
I don't know, the title to me sort of says it, bed and breakfast. Whether you serve a snack or wine later in the afternoon is another thing altogether. Otherwise, it's not a bed and breakfast, it's something else.
It's an inn.
It's a hotel.
that's right, it's a hotel.
That's how we think about it in land use categories, but those are ever changing. That's why we're having this discussion.
Right.
Can a bed and breakfast not be a single unit, but cottages?
No,
It's a single family dwelling.
Not by this definition.
no, that's lodging and that's gotta be somewhere else.
Yeah, it says all within the principal building.
Okay,
And so then maybe just keep it to breakfast only to guests for now, for simplification. I think if we start talking about inns, then
We're lost.
it's a different thing, yeah.
Are you saying may serve only breakfast, only to guests? Is that what you're saying, Wendy?
yeah, that's what it says.
Look forward, that's, yeah, as Tara has it written there.
So is that what you, now that we've decided it's breakfast, Nancy, does that work?
Would they get in trouble if they put out tea and cookies in the afternoon?
Wow.
I think
Police.
we could always change the regulation.
I want-
Or if they hand them a box lunch, but it's a served meal, right?
We'll call the cookie police.
We're trying to make sure it's not a restaurant, doesn't morph into a restaurant. Or if it goes to wedding.
Outsiders who are not staying at the bed and breakfast can eat there.
No, it says,
We said nobody else was present, I gotta mute her.
Yeah,
We haven't heard from Lucy the cat.
okay.
Well, I haven't even seen Lucy yet.
You raised a good question about events and weddings. In LDR, can I put up a big tent in my yard and hold a wedding for 60 people as just someone who owns a house? Is that allowed?
Or if it's for your family, right? Not if you're taking money to do it, then it's a business that's not allowed.
But if I can do it in an LDR at my house and bed and breakfasts, then why can't they do it? Why wouldn't they be allowed to do it?
We don't allow it.
There's a difference between a business and a residential use.
Chances are you'd only have 2, maybe 3 of your own family's weddings versus one every weekend. I think that's the traffic thing, right?
I mean, it's a business, yeah. Unless you're in the business of wedding-friendly weddings.
Okay, Wendy's catering, Nancy's catering business.
So it sounds like they may not hold events, is what you're saying.
Right.
Right.
But they can serve tea and cookies. That we don't consider that on the veranda or something like that, sure.
I think the key is, in what we've been talking about, is impact on the neighborhood. And so events, in my mind, would have a bigger impact on the neighborhood than,
Huge.
5 or fewer rooms rented out. It's just where my mindset's at. Okay.
Can we go back to the accessory use definition? Sorry. The way that's worded right now is you're allowed to have plumbing in an accessory use building?
Don't say you can't.
Don't
Right.
understand that.
So the question becomes, what is the setbacks? Do we have setbacks that are, say, you can? I thought my memory was that the setbacks are like 5 feet or something on an accessory building. So we can have an accessory building right up on the line, the property line?
You addressed that in depth at the last set of amendments. We're not saying that you can do a rental in an accessory building, and I'll separate those,
You're gonna
So-
separate
so
them.
that's clear. You can't have your guest in the shed, plumbing or not.
Does that clarify it for you, Bill?
I think we're on a very thin line here. If we allow plumbing in the building, in the accessory use building, why wouldn't people try to rent it?
I don't know why you're bringing, we're not changing anything about accessory building.
She just combined the accessory use in there.
But that was Terry's point, to separate out use and building. And that's what
Right,
she's
yeah,
gonna
we're
do.
gonna separate
So
them, yeah.
Bill, they're gonna be separate again, and you're not changing accessory building definition. Right, Tara?
And we're gonna say that what we're allowing is in an owner occupied residence.
Right.
So if it's in an owner occupied residence, it's not in the accessory building.
It's not an
Right.
accessory building, that's correct.
Nor can it be an extra room with a bed and breakfast, the way I wrote it. That's why I said all within the principal building,
Yeah,
not taking the shed and garage and the cottages.
Well, I guess I assume that answered Bill's question, since he's not in the screen anymore.
Or he just gave up on them.
Okay,
never.
anyway. So for
Okay.
sure, yeah,
So we'll need a new term, a new definition for these transient rentals of dwelling. In the HDR, I can buy a dwelling, if we do this, just to rent it out. So, well, that's not residential anymore. So how do we define it? So I threw this out to start the discussion that we put a new use in the use table called short-term rental. So it's not residential anymore, but it's I would say a dwelling unit designed for residential occupancy, but it's offered for transient rental. And this is where I think you need to think and talk about. I threw out one family at a time, thinking about this issue of do you want 5 couples in the condominium unit next door to you for the weekend? Do you want to be silent on it? Do you want to limit it? Do you want to say 2 people per bedroom? This is yours to do here. I just threw that in to start the conversation.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Because one person could rent or sign a rental agreement and say, okay, I want to rent, and then bring friends and family with them. This sort of thing does happen.
Right?
But then again, homeowners associations are likely to have regulations, since we're talking HDR and VC. So it won't completely be unregulated, depending upon what we say.
What would those most typically say, Rich? What would be a guideline in there?
I have difficulty with one family at a time, because then, I don't know, that seems limiting. If you wanted to have like, 2 couples rent a place, that kind of thing.
right.
I just search for some other language. Maybe, the number of people is consonant with the bedrooms or that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Something, I don't know the language, but something like that.
I agree. My thought went to like a girls' weekends where, you have women from 4 different families. They're different families, but they're traveling together,
You want to say no more than 2 adults per bedroom.
But then how do you define a bedroom? What if you have a room that has 2 sets of bunk beds or a bunk and a queen? I don't know.
There are a lot of bunk beds here in some of these units.
Yeah.
For a ski weekend, a lot of kids, friends bring their family up, that sort of thing. I mean, family brings their friends up.
You don't have to put a limit in it. Just threw it out there so you
No.
can think about it.
But it is a good idea. It could be something like consistent with the construction density.
Or the number of beds available or something like that. Because yeah, I agree. There's a house near ours where they built a bunk room with, I think, 4 bunk beds, so all built in. So that's a lot of people in one room, but it's built for that.
The number of people conforming to, boy, it's a tough one. Yeah.
Construction design.
Does that make sense? Construction design?
I don't think Park or Chris or I would know how to.
Enforce that?
Yeah.
I think perhaps we just don't put anything in there, offered to transient rental period, because then you have sleeper couches or, you know.
Right, but what you want to avoid is greatly increasing the density that would normally be expected in that building or condominium.
But wouldn't parking achieve that?
Well, it should.
It should. There's always a way to beat the regulations.
Right. There are associations which will govern the rentals, presumably. But I do think you ought to say maybe something just to get a sense of what the board was thinking. I mean, we were trying to say, I think, limited to the number of bedrooms, that are not bedrooms, but sleeping arrangements, or I don't know. I'm in
How
a
about permitted sleeping arrangements? Because I think we were talking about that if you're doing short-term rentals, that it needs to be permitted if it's going to be more than 90 days or something like that. So then you need a permit. And I think we could determine how many people can sleep there as part of the permit, and that's how many people can be there.
The number of people consistent with the safety code.
I think you're gonna need to require a site plan review if you want a hand in it like that.
For permitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want, I circled that in the table because you wanted to come back to that question of, do you want to require a site plan review?
It might be the only way to satisfy the need to understand how it's being used.
And I think it's our only recourse for if someone's abusive to how they're using it in terms of lots of neighbor complaints.
All right. I think a short-term rental is a verb. You've got it defined as a noun here. Is that your intent?
We do use it as a noun, yeah, in planning. It's a land use, a short-term rental is the building.
Darren?
So
I think we're all happy with a girls' weekend, but I think we're worried about the frat boys and just a bunch of guys getting together.
right, but I think Nancy has the right idea that if it's in the permitting, then that's cut and dry. So then if someone's exceeding their occupancy, and yes, it requires an extra step for the site plan for anyone who wants to do these transient rentals, but then that allows us to make sure it's done safely.
And you now have the minor site plan category, which they could come in for. And you could put a condition that's the maximum number of people that you feel is appropriate to that, make it a condition of approval.
Yeah.
As we still don't want to step outside of the concept of residential. It is high density residential, but if you allow a business to take on much higher densities than expected, then we're outside the definition of residential.
And you have parking issues. So I think going through the minor site plan process makes sense.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
That works, yeah. We
Okay.
covered things, yeah.
Put something just to the zoning permit that requires any discretion. That's not Chris's job. If it needs discretion, that needs to come to the planning board.
Okay.
That makes sense. So then if we're trying to transient, we need to give that a definition. Whoops. And this is what I would recommend is that it's offered for rent in increments of less than 30 days.
Yep, that's what we've been talking about all along.
Yes.
Consistent with the building code.
Yep.
And I think a lot of communities are saying rented in increments less than 30 days, but I think the key is that it's offered.
Yes, except that that's a key word.
Yeah. The other thing I would recommend in the definitions is I heard some confusion at the last meeting about the language when we added the accessory dwelling unit piece as required under state law, and the state lets you require that one or the other be lived in by the owner, and you made the decision that it's a resort community, you don't want to do that, and so the language that you landed on was this: either the primary dwelling unit or the accessory dwelling unit or both may be rent. We weren't thinking about transient rental at that time. So I would clarify it and turn the sentence around to say neither unit is required to be owner occupied. And we're addressing the transient versus long-term in other places.
Okay.
I think that gets rid of that confusion.
This is an LDR constraint.
This is,
It's wherever it is.
it's a lack of a constraint.
Yeah, okay, but it's applicable to LDR.
It's
I don't think there are two families in LDR, are there?
This isn't a duplex. This is the in-law apartment.
This is the door inside. So it can be anywhere.
Right.
I got it.
So anywhere you have a single family dwelling, under state law, you can have the accessory dwelling unit. And you wanted to clarify that the owner doesn't have to live in either the main house or the apartment. And I think this is a clearer way to say that than
Yep.
how we did it.
Okay.
So then, the only other language I think we need to add, again, other than altering the use table, is some language in the home occupation section. You have a, sorry,
Can I ask you to go back just for a second to the definition right there, yes. Either unit is required to be owner occupied. Now, in your table, there was, one of the line items was for rental, and it was fine as long as one of the units was owner occupied.
Yeah.
Is that in conflict with this? Or?
no, that's gonna be somewhere else. This is just the definition.
But someone could say, you go to the definition where, and on your table where it says two-family residential unit, they could say, well, neither one of these units has to be occupied by the owner. And that would be conflicting with your table, which says you can have short-term rental or something like that, as long as one of the units is occupied by the owner.
I understand what you're saying. It's not gonna be in conflict when we're done.
Okay,
The table is just for discussion for you guys.
okay.
And yeah, there'll be a little more work I need to do to, like, I haven't had time yet to go through your entire ordinance and tell you for sure that this is everything you need to change. This is off the top of my head what I think you need to change. This is work in progress. So, but yeah, we'll make sure that's not in conflict. And I think where I wouldn't worry about it is for the residential use, neither unit needs to be owner occupied. Transient is not residential. It's gonna be allowing that separately.
No, that's fine, but I agree with you, as long as you address it when you come up with the final.
We're gonna articulate it under the home occupation part too. This is where I would add, so there's a list of examples that are home occupations in the ordinance. I would add a line that adds what you want to be home occupation system, which is renting 1 or 2 bedrooms in your home or half of what we were just talking about, the in-law apartment building. But I would articulate it as a home occupation. And I would articulate that a permit's required for certain kinds of home occupations. And maybe there are other things you want to add to this list. Maybe it includes if they have a sign on it. So that they get
Yes.
a sign permit.
They do need to get a sign permit, yep.
I would agree with that.
Just to be a good reminder, right? Is there anything else about a home occupation that you want to make sure they're coming in for a zoning permit? Not, they don't need site plan review for a home occupation. Home occupations are exempt from site plan review, but should they need to come see Chris so that he can make sure the zoning's being followed?
What about lighting?
So I come to see Chris, is it a specific rental that he approves, or he approves the use of the building for, for rentals for a year?
He's approving changing the use. It's not a year at a time, it's permanent unless there's a violation.
The permanent use. So if you had if you wanted to rent out a room, you'd have to go to Chris and say, give me a permit that allows me to do this and it would then go with the building and be forever.
Correct. That's correct.
I'm not sure, well, that's not the way other towns do it, or at least, okay, that's not the way Rancho Mirage does it, and
That's the zoning, that's the business permit. Just
so you're saying there's a separate safety permit?
if the select board decided to require a business permit, that could be something that's renewed every year. But a zoning permit under New Hampshire law doesn't ever have to be renewed, and it goes with the land. You can't be looking at another state and comparing it with both New Hampshire law.
But I guess I'm still worried about safety. I mean, 10 years down the line, there's no fire extinguishers, somebody's blocked the exit door, they've become hoarders and the basement's full of paper. I mean, so are we gonna insist on annual safety checks?
I think if you did that, you want to do it for all lodging and have it be a select board business permit.
So we're saying, and I guess I'm new to this, no one checks up on the lodging that is in
Yes.
town?
Yes.
The hotels?
Yes, we do. Yes.
That's a mark question.
No, yes, we do check on the lodging under the building codes, life safety codes. If it is above a certain threshold, all commercial businesses in town have occupancy permits, and those are renewed every year by the fire department. So there is a fire inspection that is done under the building codes. So for these residential type uses with 1 or 2 rooms being rented out, they're not going to rise to the level under the building codes. So if you want to have annual reviews of these permitted uses, then we're going to have to adopt a separate building or a business permit or something along those lines and make them subject to an annual review or biannual or whatever. I would recommend that you guys come up with an idea, let Chris come in and talk to you about what that means from an enforcement side when you have the public hearing.
Well, Mark, I think the select board, I don't know where that noise is from. The select board can do that as a business permit after the zoning passes.
Yeah, fine, if that's the way we want to do it. Yep.
I mean, you can't put that in the zoning ordinance, but conversely, the select board can't have a business permit for something that's not allowed in the zoning.
That's
So I
right.
think that's a next step.
All I'm saying is if there are concerns for the planning board about enforcement, like the question that Nancy just asked, Chris should come in and have that conversation with you. We can decide how to implement it later on if the zoning changes are made. But I don't want anyone on the planning board to think that we don't inspect anything around town. We do every year.
Right, so then if the zoning moves forward, the planning board could make the recommendation to the select board of what we think would be appropriate?
Yes, absolutely. To address the questions that Nancy had about the 1 and 2 bedroom, because it would not be automatic under the building codes.
This is an owner occupied
The owner,
residence.
that's correct. Like the bed and breakfast, there is a specific building code for bed and breakfasts. I think it is the 5-bedroom limit.
Yeah, Mark, I tried to stay, there's 2 levels in there. One's called something like lodging house, that's a lower threshold than bed and breakfast. I actually tried to stay with that one.
Yes, right. And so there are already some reviews that are required and some building requirements that are in the code.
Well, I think, the lower threshold, I am by no means an expert on the building code, but I thought that the lower threshold with the 5 bedrooms let them just comply with the IRC.
Yes, I think you're right.
That's how I read it and why I stayed with that. It's just gonna be less complicated for everybody.
Right.
I think the 5 bedroom, what we're saying, the 5 bedroom cutoff makes it so people can still just go by the residential building code rather than the business one.
Okay. But so any reviews would be within that parameter of a residential building as opposed to commercial. So like no ADA compliance or that type of thing.
Right.
But they couldn't put them in a basement with no windows.
Right. I mean, and that lets somebody, again, use an already built large home that they can't afford anymore.
Right.
That was built to the residential.
Okay.
I think the only difference in there is if it was on the 3rd floor, you need sprinklers, but there are even exceptions to that. So, yeah. But yeah, that's a next step, and I think that's where it's important to be requiring, saying that these things need either a zoning permit or site plan review, something, so that somebody's checking, right?
Yes.
Whereas right now, they're all flying under the radar as commercial uses of residential buildings.
Exactly.
So I need really to have a little more time with this, to go through the whole ordinance, make sure we've caught everything, make any adjustments I need to make in response to this discussion. And so I do think we need another meeting somewhere before we can or you can schedule a public hearing.
I agree.
So if we want to present this in a public meeting in December and January, so that it can be brought up at the town meeting the beginning of March.
Yeah.
Then we need to have another special meeting, workshop, call it whatever you want.
Yep.
Expeditiously.
I think you need it next week, because
Well, that's pretty expeditiously.
in your public hearing date for December that you decided would be the 9th. So it's gotta be posted around Thanksgiving. Mark, I don't know what your policy's gonna be, but it doesn't have to go on the newspaper anymore. That law changed earlier.
That's correct. Yeah, we will not use the newspaper.
So we don't need to worry, we used to have to worry about newspaper deadline. Now we don't. So I think that puts it like, you know, we'd want to give it to Mark or Nick, the day before Thanksgiving to post. I think.
Which means next week.
Technically, 10 days would be like day after Thanksgiving, but we're not gonna do that probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you need to meet next week. I think I need to do the next step on this and making it look real and done, and complete.
So we have to meet next Thursday or Wednesday or
Wednesday,
someday next week.
Wednesday's the only morning I'm not available.
Or we could look at.
I'm not available on Wednesday morning.
Are evenings a possibility, Tara?
I have meetings. I just answered an email while we were talking to say, no, I don't have a meeting date available next week.
Okay.
But it's somebody who may want to move the Tuesday one to another night. It's possible Tuesday one, but I don't know yet.
Well, you know, I'm sure Nancy can lead the meeting just fine if you guys wanted to go ahead and do it on Thursday. I just have to pick my daughter from college, so that's why I can't be there.
Are people available at all during the day other than first thing in the morning? Wednesday's the only day that I have something during the day.
Can you do it later in the day, Wendy? Because I would just like to have your input.
I've got to drive down to New London, Connecticut and back in one day, so.
And I have a 6:30 meeting, so we might not have much time in between those.
Yeah, it's a good, I'll probably be on the road for 10 hours, so.
Is there a day people could be available at 4?
Pretty much any day I could be.
No,
I have a school board meeting next Wednesday afternoon.
Could be available at 4 on Tuesday.
I can only do Wednesday and Thursday at 4.
Yeah, Tuesday's a bad day for me,
4
but
o'clock.
Thursday's okay.
Somebody else said not Thursday. Well, Wendy, you're not.
I said Tuesday, and I cannot do 4 o'clock on Tuesday.
Monday at 4? Boy, that doesn't give me much time, but I can do it.
I can't do it then.
All right, what's the answer then here?
It sounds like,
One thing, we could make it if we did it Thanksgiving week.
Nobody said Friday.
I can't do it anytime Friday.
I just offered Friday to the town that just asked me if I have anything available. It's not gonna be Friday morning, but.
so Tara, are you suggesting maybe the 23rd or 24th, 25th, somewhere in there?
In those days, like 8, I can do 8 any morning. I can do Monday anytime.
How does that week look for everyone?
Monday at 8, that's okay.
Fairly open, but it would be lovely to not do it at 8 because I'll be in a different time zone.
I have no restriction.
Monday would be fine for me.
How different a time zone? Because I did do a conference with somebody from Alaska.
Oh, there's a throwdown.
And we
All right,
made
well-
sure not to start our session till 10 for them.
Well, it's 3 hours different, so if you guys start at 8, I'm there at 5.
But you were so good and perky when we did it that way before.
And I would do it again if that's what the decision was.
How about the afternoon on Monday?
I could do after 4 o'clock on the 23rd.
I have men's tennis starting at 5. But
Does 4 o'clock on Monday work?
Yeah, 4 on Monday the 23rd would be good for me. How about everybody else?
Okay,
I would have to leave at 4:45.
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
You can leave early.
I would also leave at 4:45 for our men's tennis group.
3:30, is that, someone say can't do it till 4?
Yeah, I'm working till 4. Not tennis or anything like that, but working.
No, working is important.
23rd at 4.
That would give us plenty of time to kind of think through everything. And basically at that point, Tara, would you be able to send us anything that you worked on in advance so we'd be able to look it over?
Well, I'm gonna have to. I mean, I've got
that would be important.
sorry?
That would be important, even mandatory to make this meeting work.
Right, I will, well, that gives me the weekend to do it and send it, so look for it Sunday night.
No, sorry, Monday the 23rd.
Look for it Sunday night.
No, wait,
Sunday the 22nd?
we're on the
Yeah, the whole
12th
week.
now, so we're not talking the 16th, we're talking the 23rd.
I understand that, but I already had a pretty full week, so
Oh, gotcha.
I can get it sooner, great, but it may not fit my schedule till that weekend. And so the latest you'd get it is that Sunday night. If I can do it sooner, I certainly will.
Gotcha.
But that's the absolute latest you'll see it.
Okay. And basically at that meeting, we would need to decide what is moving forward, if anything, for public hearing for December.
And
Yeah.
can you just confirm for me we're 4 o'clock on the 23rd? Yeah, okay. I didn't write it down, I was still listening. Yeah, I mean, if I can get it sooner, I will, but, I already was working 7 days through this weekend again, so I'll do my best. I really want to do it with a clear head, not kind of hurried between other things, because I want to read through the ordinance carefully and make sure we didn't miss anything.
Absolutely.
So what time have we settled on the 23rd?
4 o'clock?
4 p.m.
And I'm writing on my calendar for the 22nd to get it to by then at the latest.
Okay.
So the plan,
And it will look,
go ahead, I'm sorry, Tara.
so it'll look, instead of this table, it's gonna be changes to the use table that you have in the zoning. Will look more amendment-like.
Yep.
Okay, but this chart form really is helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Right there.
And I think it would be helpful to the public to look at the chart too.
I really like tables rather than paragraphs.
And my concern is if you have different use tables in the zoning ordinance, then you're going down a confusing path. I really wanna have you take a look first at what it would look like added to the table you have already.
Oh,
Sure.
that would be fun.
What if we missed an inconsistency between the two?
Right.
That's the problem with redundancy. Redundancy in life is usually a good thing, in a zoning ordinance, it's not.
At the public hearing on December 10th, I mean, we could break it out presentationally as what we're talking about.
Yeah, and that would be the
Yeah.
ninth. Your public hearing date, you decided for the evenings before, so
The evening before, sorry.
I'm gonna block the evening of the 9th out for you now. And yeah, I can certainly, use the table for the public hearing. I can update it for the public hearing. That's a good idea.
Okay.
What time on the 9th did you block out?
What, let me look at my,
Well, if we move forward, it'd be
6
6,
o'clock.
yeah.
Okay.
If we decide to move forward with the public hearing, it would be, 6 o'clock on the 9th.
That's kind of your standing public hearing time that you decided earlier.
All right, so for now, we'll table this discussion. But everyone keep thinking and working through, and then we'll watch for Tara's updates by the 22nd,
At the latest, yep.
the latest, and be ready to be concise and decisive on the 23rd at 4 o'clock. Okay,
And the next thing about your schedule, then you're meeting the next morning where you can talk about what you want to do about what you heard at the hearing. So that works well.
Sounds like fun.
yes, it's a plan. Okay, so that little first part of our meeting is all set for today.
It's all put in the big stone in the bucket first.
There you go. I like that. That's always the best way to load the bucket.
So the little 2.5 hour discussion?
Yes. So subdivision form review is next on our agenda. And Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time to really go through. And did everyone get what Nancy had sent us yesterday evening, the kind of draft
Yes.
subdivision? Do we need to look at sharing this on the screen, or does everyone have a paper copy to look at?
I hope you haven't printed it out. It's a lot of pages.
It is a lot.
I don't have,
That's good.
Even double-sided. Tara, do you have that? Would you be able to share it?
Sorry,
Screen
What?
share?
which,
The forms for the subdiv, right?
which version was my question?
Oh, sorry.
I sent out a combined one last night, pretty late.
Okay, so that's the one that you want here.
Yeah. It had my comments about the
Yeah,
stuff.
no, I got it. I just wanted to know which version you wanted here. You want me to scroll to the things you highlighted?
Yeah, I mean, this is the cover page, and I think someone had asked about that. Was it you, Terry, that said, oh, that was you, Terry. So this is the cover page. Does this meet with your expectations, Terry?
Yeah, my concern was that to pick out an application from a file that's a couple of years old or something like that, any one of these forms might come up individually without being packaged into something. And I thought that the particular form that I had commented on was the one for either the concept review or the design review. And I wanted to have it in the title, the fact that it was for such a review relative to the subdivision of the property. But Tara responded and said that, well, if you do that, you kind of limit the idea that the person might not want to put in, or might be confused about putting in a lot line adjustment or a merger or something like that. So I'm not really hard on it. I just thought it might be a little clearer if you picked up the form as an individual form to realize that it was referenced to a subdivision regulation as opposed to, say, site plan or some other.
I think this is the form, right?
Yes, that was the one. And I was thinking, my comment was to make it, we request for optional pre-application review for subdivision, so that you know it relative to the subdivision regulations. But I'm not real hard on that, and I think Tara's explanation was reasonable.
It's easy to add. If it makes it clearer, why not?
Why don't you just add, or even something in the heading here of a meeting is requested for pre-application review pursuant to the subdivision regulations.
Anything like that's at the beginning of the form would help somebody researching it to know that that's what it was.
Yeah, I would put it there in that first sentence, just add it on there.
Okay, done. The other thing is, if you just go up a little bit, I just wanted to point out that I added at the bottom of every page, it says the title of what the page is, which doesn't matter so much if it's a one-page document, but some of them are much longer, as well as Town of Waterville Valley with our logo on it.
This isn't right yet, then.
Yeah, that's not right. So that needs a fix. Yeah, when they got merged, things got a little messed up. So I can fix that.
Always. So Nancy, just so you know, and I haven't been part of the loop since you guys approved the content and I handed the formatting off to Nick, but I provided them as separate Word files with the idea that you would edit the Word file, make it a PDF, and then I merged the PDFs so that those things, the formatting didn't break that way. If you merge them as Word files, you'll have to edit the whole packet every time you make a change to one. So I'd encourage the town to keep it as separate Word files like I provided it.
Okay, I did do all my edits on the separate Word files, and I just put this together. I don't own a copy of Adobe.
Yeah, I do. Just send me what you want merged.
Oh, okay. That would be great, because I can't merge separate PDF files, but that would be great.
We can here
No, just
too.
send them me. That's easy.
I can also do that if you need to, Nancy.
But yeah, if you merge it as, I mean, it's almost impossible to keep the formatting right if you try to merge them in advance. I've found that's like, it takes longer for me to deal with that than to write something sometimes.
Oh, so one. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Especially with the footers like this. That's just, yeah. Make the PDFs and then send them to me 2 minutes to put all in one.
Oh my God.
Literally 2 minutes.
Okay. So if we go on this one, this page, by the way, I changed it from sample number F, or letter F, from a sample subdivider improvement agreement. That's not really what it was. It was more of a template where you fill in the blanks. It was not a sample. A sample would have been filled in with sample information.
Understand?
So, do you agree it's a template?
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on. All right.
Nancy, going along with what you had just mentioned with regard to the fact that some of these applications or forms were multi-paged, and so down at the bottom, lower left-hand corner, you put the title of what the form actually was. Should we also considering putting sheet 1 of 2 or 1 of 5 or something like that in there so that we know how many sheets there are in the whole thing? I realize we have it A2 and A3 and so forth, but should it say A2 out of 5 or something like that?
If you think so, we can do A2 out of 3 or whatever.
You could say sheet 1 out of 5 or sheet 1 of 5 or something like that.
I'll have to try to shorten that. It'll be at the top of the page.
Right.
Okay. So I had added a lot of town of, just because it just, like, our town isn't called Waterville Valley, it's Town of Waterville Valley. And I kept on thinking, what if New York did New York and not New York City? And it didn't make sense to me, so I just added it. It didn't change much.
Cool.
Okay.
Good.
All right, in this document right here, Tara had suggested that since it's a non-binding pre-application review, there was no reason for anyone to sign anything.
No, I wasn't saying that, Nancy. I'm
Oh.
sorry. Sometimes emails just aren't the best way. I was trying to say, I wouldn't care who signs it. For some of the forms, you absolutely want every owner to sign it. For pre-application review, I think if it was the applicant and it's not the owner, that should be fine too. Because people often send their surveyor in for the pre-application discussion, and I think that's fine. So I'm sorry, I didn't answer the right question, I think.
Okay, so keep the lines, but change owner to applicant?
That would be fine, yeah. I don't see a reason you should care who signs the pre-application review form, because nobody's committing to anything, but somebody should.
Somebody should sign. Okay. Good clarification.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
Do we allow a pre-application review for if the owner doesn't agree?
Doesn't agree to what?
Well, it's non-binding, so
Doesn't agree to the review?
well, tell me why it matters if it's non-binding.
If someone wants to go through all that effort.
It's just that I wouldn't want somebody coming into a meeting discussing my property without my approval.
Has it happened yet? I don't know, 30-something years, I just haven't seen that happen. I have seen one owner of a property get approval for something that another owner didn't like, and the taxes went up as a result. So I feel really strongly that anything binding needs every owner to sign it. But people often just send their surveyor or engineer in for the pre-application review, and I don't think they always have the owner's signature. I've never waited on it.
Keep going, Nancy.
Well, Tara, do you mind scrolling down more? I don't have control.
I will, 1 second, sorry. Because we're going a little later than I planned, I'm just trying to answer a couple emails while we do this.
Okay, can you just go up so we can see the context of the notice costs? And maybe this is for Mark, because I just didn't understand why do we have all these categories for notice costs? We have the amount that the notice cost, and then a different line for how much we billed. Will we really build a different amount? And then do we really receive different amounts?
So when I was kind of interpreting, I did this part, I was kind of interpreting your current form and trying to a little bit guess what they might be looking for. And I think this is, you've determined what the cost is. Somebody should verify that the applicant has been invoiced that. So I didn't see this as the amount, but maybe it's the date or it's the initials, and who received this amount that came, and they should put their initials. That's how you know. See, you shouldn't approve anything that isn't all paid. You need a document that shows you that it was all paid.
So the receipt wasn't meant to be a dollar amount, it was meant to be someone's initials?
Yeah, in my
Well, it's got a dollar sign.
Well, look up a processing fee received. So is that what we need? And it should say like notice cost received with dollar, by, and date.
I think it's probably a conversation to have with Mark and Sharon.
Is Mark on the call?
He's hiding now, he was.
Mark stepped away for a second. I just texted him to see if he'll jump back on.
Okay, because I mean, there's a lot of lines here. I don't want to have a form. It just doesn't make sense where you don't need, like, you only want exactly what you need, nothing more, nothing less.
Especially for a pre-application form that
Yeah.
is sort of non-binding.
Yeah, so you still want to know that it's been paid. I think that's the key thing, is what was the fee and whether it's been paid. And I like the way of initials because if somebody says they paid it, you can verify that, but, I mean, again, this is for the town office staff, so it maybe should be driven by their needs.
Yeah, that's why, like, the processing fee received, I mean, it probably should just be like notice cost received. I mean, because you just write in the dollar amount, it's not gonna change. It seems insane to have it 3 times. And then when you get it, you write the date you got it and who received it.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever supposed to be the dollar amount 3 times.
What?
Well, that's what all of the forms are. So that's why I'm asking why. All right, well, why don't we move on and I guess Mark will be the one to decide
I'm
if I
here.
can get rid of this too.
What's the question? Sorry,
You guys had a bunch of different spaces on your forms
yeah,
on money. Are they the dollar amount and then what? What do you
Well,
need to document?
there may be different notices sent out. And I think we just used those lines before so you have the original notice. If there's a continuation, there may be another notice required. It's whatever, it was just a place to put the different notices.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder, Mark. That's why they all had dollar signs, because there may be more than one notice.
All right, so that line doesn't make any sense with the bill received. It should probably be something that says notice cost received with the dollar, by, and date. And there could be like a notice cost 1, a notice cost
Exactly.
2,
Yeah,
a notice cost 3,
that's
something
good.
like that. How many
Yep.
notices do you usually send out?
Well, it varies. It depends on if there are continuations or
I can call you.
whatever. So I think if you just put 3, that would be plenty.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay. Do we need 3 lines for design review meetings? How many do people usually have?
Well, that can go on quite a while.
Okay. All right. I mean, you can fit a lot of dates on there. Okay.
I didn't look at the last couple drafts. I did the content and handed it over to Nick for the formatting.
Yeah, so basically on page B2, I noticed that on another document, you actually specified, or we specified the size of the paper print copies. So I'm just wondering, is this the size we want? Do we want to specify a size? We hadn't.
Yes.
You were on the right page, B2?
We should specify size because
Okay.
we often get 11 by 17s as the plans and you can't read them. So the 22 by 34 is the plan size, and that's really what we need.
And it's the maximum that can be recorded with the Grafton County
Right.
Register of Deeds.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll keep that. That it was just not there. Okay. And then on B3.
It's in the regulations anyway.
Okay. Why don't we keep going to B3? I just added a lot of town ofs. I don't think it changed much, just made it clearer.
Okay.
Okay, B4, it's that same notice cost. We can just move on.
I'll go by these, the town of, right?
Yeah, and some of these are just, this said provision, I think it said by or to, anyways, it just makes sense for, I just changed it.
It should be the same as in the regulations unless we've got a typo in there.
Oh, actually, then I'm not sure what the regulations say.
These would have been, when I did this for you guys, and again, I haven't seen the last couple drafts, this content was copied and pasted from the regulations to make sure it matched exactly.
All right, so I'll look at the regs. Okay.
And
so in other words, should I take out the town ofs if they're not in our regulations?
No, that's
okay.
semantics.
Just Tara, on each page at the bottom, the town symbol there is upside down.
Yeah, I think I didn't do this, Mark. It hasn't been in my hands for the last couple.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. I mean, whenever you correct it, just turn that right side up.
Oh, that's pretty funny. Well, when I send her the documents, I should send them to Tara, I guess, and it'll be individual Word documents and it'll be fixed.
Yeah, okay. Just noticed as you were scrolling through them, Nick.
Yeah, I noticed that too, but I'm trying not to nitpick.
Yeah, all right.
that's a little
It was so
more than
small, I
nitpick.
couldn't even see it, I gotta be honest.
I call that a little more than nitpicking.
All right. I think pretty straightforward.
What was in here before?
It said, it was something weird. It was like to keep the town harmless. Did somebody have the original document? It was a word that didn't make sense.
Okay, good.
In real English, you say something, you hold someone harmless.
Right.
It's just the way it is. All right, I did not understand what we're talking about here. I just wanted to be clear.
Well, the regulations are clear. Again, this goes with the regulations. The regulations are clear that the planning board can ask for more material. There's no harm in saying it here.
No, I just want to be totally clear. So if the planning board requests, because it's the passive voice with no subject, so it's a terrible sentence. And so I'm like, well, who would ask for this additional stuff? So it's the planning board. That I just wanted to be totally clear.
Yep.
So if the planning board requests and no one else is requesting information, then you would attach notice to applicant to this form. Is that right?
If you don't accept the application as complete, you need to give them a written notice, and I would discourage you from repeating everything in the state law and regulations in the forms. These are forms that go with the regulations, but you have to provide written notice to the applicant why it was incomplete. So I'm suggesting you staple it right to this form, and then the paper trail.
All right,
Rather
is
than
that
just having it be in the minutes.
notice to applicant? All right, so that's not one of these forms. That's just a planning board notice to an applicant.
It could be a copy of the page of the minutes, but
Okay.
I want to see you put it right in the file rather than have to search around minutes.
That would make it a lot easier.
Okay, great. Move on. All right, yeah, I had some questions about C8. All of those that say date, they said received. And I'm like, what do you mean received? Are you trying to say that you want to write the date you got them? The date received?
Received by.
Or do you want to say who received them? Because received was not enough info to know exactly what was supposed to go on that line?
That's a Mark question.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can put received by, that's fine, and a date.
So you want, okay, because before it said received, so now what you want is both the date and who received it.
Received by. And I would put also in parentheses after easements and or rights of way, I would put attached to this form, again, to have it in a single file.
Okay. So if they're not written down right there because they're, only a few words, then we should say, or attach document to file.
Yes.
Attach separate document. Okay. Cool. And then under recording, under dates, do you want the date the deed was received? Do you need that? it's something that you asked on it, or we asked on a different document, and I'm just wondering, do we need that here?
I don't know why you would.
Or what form are we on?
I might have just.
Is this
tried to be too
this
consistent.
subdivision application, Nancy, still?
Yes.
Yes.
Why would you be asking for a deed with that?
Okay, so makes no sense and get
No,
rid of it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Cross it out.
The only thing I'd recommend where you'd want the deed first is a lot line adjustment. We typically want to see the plan and the deed and record those together so that that little bitty piece that's being changed never exists by itself.
Right.
Okay. Okey doke. And then D1, I might have just wordsmithed that a little bit. It's essentially fine.
Yeah.
I guess, Tara, it's owners that you care about, right? That is who should be in the blanks for these.
And one of those slow learners, we're doing, this is the notice of the incomplete application. Are we there yet?
Yes, D1.
This comes from the planning board.
Yep.
I don't see the owners anywhere on it.
Oh, no, the very first line. So you are hereby notified that the application by, and I just wrote that it should be the owners. I can't remember, but I wanted to be specific about who do you put in that blank?
You know, I think it could be the name of the subdivision. I don't think that matters. This is not a legal thing. This is.
I would keep it all in the same name, don't you think, Tara? So just put applicant rather than owners, because
Yeah.
it's
That's
whoever's
good.
on the
Yeah,
application.
Nobody's signing it. You're just
Right.
giving them the order.
Right. And the owner
Okay,
you can
so-
find with the tax
Applicant.
map and lot number.
Yeah, that's better. Applicant. Okay.
Right. I mean, if it's Birch Hill, I would say Birch Hill, but
Right.
even.
Okay, good. Okay, and then the other blanks, are they labeled correctly? Because they were just blanks, I think, before, so I just want to make sure that we're asking, like, we're clear about what information we're asking for on each of these blanks.
Yeah, it says the following additional information, so I'd say they'd be okay.
I see what you're saying, Nancy. Yeah.
Okay, street address, date of meeting, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so on the next one, if we're done with that one, that's notice of action. Should I should change that to applicant also?
I would.
Okay,
All right, is there some place where the applicant gets tied to the owner in the whole process?
On the subdivision application, yes.
Yeah.
The owners all have to sign it saying you can speak for us as the applicant.
And we have addresses or some way of getting a notice to the owner as well as the applicant, is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's on the application.
And it also ties back in on the tax map and lot number as well.
I'm just wondering about this notice. I'm thinking, there's an awful lot of notification going on here. And like Bill says, say you have somebody living in a house with another person and only one of them owns it and the other person decides he wants to do something with it. The owner's off in Florida somewhere and this guy's handling, the other person's property as the applicant or something like that. Somehow, somewhere, I would think the owner would have to sign off on it.
You're not coming anywhere near this step until the owners have all signed the application to have the subdivision reviewed.
okay. Anything else there? Otherwise, we can move to the next page, F1, the subdivider improvement agreement template. I just didn't, where it says Waterville Valley, it didn't really Okay. That didn't make sense.
I wouldn't add that. I think it makes it confusing.
I didn't add it. I wanted to take it away.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about the town of Waterville Valley, situated in Waterville Valley. I just thought if you want to be specific, it's in the Russ Municipal Building, and where it's a little weird anyways.
Well, I think Waterville Valley should probably be here.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's also tautological. The town of Waterville Valley, situated in the town of Waterville Valley.
Well, I don't know. It's like seat of the corporation, but
Okay, so should I just move it there then?
I would move it. Yeah.
Move it
Okay.
there, and I would make it situated or at the Russ Municipal Building, Waterville Valley, County of Grafton, State of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that's your old form. We didn't make any changes to this, so that's what you have now. That you've never noticed.
Yeah, because,
I don't think I've ever looked at this, but
well, no, this has always been between the developer and the town manager. And because the rest of that document, the referral should be quote unquote town, just means it should be town after that if you're referring to the town of Waterville Valley.
yeah, and it is.
Okay.
To be consistent, Nancy, I think in that sentence it says, whereas the developer has applied to the town of Waterville Valley Planning Board. That's what you've been saying throughout the whole process.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll add that. Thank you. Yeah, and I think once, I'll do it once at the top and then leave the rest. I think they'll be clear in the rest of the document. So I added one other word down at the bottom because it said except by a written, and then it didn't say anything. It said it by written, duly executed by the authorized agent of each party. So I think we meant notice.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
That's just more town.
Yep. Other than that, it was just formatting. Yeah, that's done.
I would encourage you guys to adopt this with the changes that Nancy's gonna make, so that, I mean, you've been quite a while now with forms that don't go with your regulations. But we'll wait another month.
First thing we should do is thank Nancy for her review.
Yay.
Yep.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yay.
Nancy.
You're very welcome.
All right, so do I hear a motion for the forms for the subdivision regulations as they've been amended?
This is Rich. I move to accept the subdivision forms as amended, as presented to us at this meeting.
Second motion.
All right, all those in favor, Nancy,
Aye.
Bill Larson,
He died.
is Bill still with us?
He's not yet.
There you go. Wendy, yes, John,
John Racine, yes.
Rich,
Rich, aye.
Bill Spence,
Aye.
Terry,
Aye.
all right. So again, thank you, Nancy, for all your work with that. So,
Thank you, Dan.
so we'll get fresh copies of these forms. Or I guess Nancy, if you would make those corrections, and then what you were gonna send them to Tara to get the layout correct, and then we can shoot those over for Tara.
I'm just gonna merge it into one packet.
Right.
If she sends it
Should I send them
to me,
to you I'll send them to you and Nick as Word documents, so that should any changes ever need to be made, they'll be easy to make. And you can just convert them to PDFs?
Yeah, I can do that and provide them to Nick as separate files and all one. Mark?
Yeah, Mark, are you waiting?
Nick's got a comment.
If they're just sent to me, I can merge them as well. It's not difficult.
Just take a little bit off your plate, Tara, so you can work on the other stuff for the public hearing. We can.
Yeah, that'll
we can
take
do
us
that.
down.
Merge.
Sometimes 8 towns are a lot to juggle, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
Only 8.
8's my limit. I won't take more than 8. I can just handle 8.
Oh, good.
So send them to
I
us.
was lucky to have you.
Yes.
All right, well, excellent. So that's under control. Our CIP, how is that coming along, CIP people?
It is not, because we
Oh.
are, right now, the road engineers, the road engineering is occurring, so we need to table this until next month. We are not, we're not ready yet, but it
Okay,
is in process.
okay. So then we can move on to committee reports. All right, for the town core, we haven't necessarily, and we haven't made any significant progress in one way or another, except for continuing the discussion as far as the best way forward with the bathhouse versus just, we want to compare the cost of just doing little standalone simple bathrooms, kind of more like what you'd see in a campground type of area, prefab type of thing, versus doing something all large, just because of how it will interact with the chapel. So not a whole lot of movement is happening with the town core group right now. Any questions? Anything I forgot, Nancy?
No.
Were we not also having a discussion about the creation of a new recreation center facility?
Wasn't that the alternative to the bathhouse?
Well, I don't believe, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, because I believe the select board's kind of taken on with this more. Was that?
Yeah, correct. Given the other issues that have arisen in the CIP, the wastewater treatment plan and whatnot, we're really trying to figure out how to proceed on this. I don't see anything happening in the near term, frankly. By that, I guess I mean next year. We're struggling. We need to understand more about the chapel, whether we want to go with whether we'll have the money to go with a sort of like a rec type building as opposed to the, just some bathrooms or a pavilion. We're just wrestling with it right now, as I think the town core working group and as a CIP is, until we get a better handle on these costs that we'll be facing in the next few years. So things are kind of just there right now.
Rich, there really isn't room where we purchased the land for the bathhouse. There really isn't room there, is there, for a rec area? We would have to purchase other land as well?
There's you're correct, but not purchase other land. We have other land by Packard's Field that we could install a building. But again, I mean, it depends on.
By Packard's Field or Packard's Field?
I'm sorry?
By Packard's Field or Packard's Field?
I think it's just on the edge of Packard's Field. I'd have to look at the exact.
There's both, Mike.
It's both. Yeah.
Packard's Field and the area around it, but that's way down the road. Like Rich said, the reason that this is getting held up is we need cost estimates on some mandatory things, improvements that we're going to need before we can start talking about the optional things. And so we're in a holding pattern until we get the mandatory numbers. And we are working on those as well.
Sounds like fun. Okay.
Good. Moving on.
Okay, so, Conservation Commission, any committee report?
Hi, John Racine here. So, just a couple of things. The committee is recommended to assess all the culverts in town. We've noticed that there's been a lot of areas that are, the culverts are like halfway blocked, and suggest that that be taken a look at by the town. And I just want to remind everyone that Rick Vanderpool is our ecosystem management consultant, much like Tara. So he's been involved in a lot of this. We also are still, again, recommending a 25-foot setback. And some of the reasons we have
Sorry, setback from what, Jen?
for buildings,
For wetlands or for,
yeah, from wetlands, yes. And again, some of the reasons we have some contamination risk along some of the areas that have septic systems, West Branch Road, River Road. There's a lot of septic systems in that area still. So these are some of the things that we should all keep our eyes on, and just we're going to continue to discuss it in the meetings and get back to the planning board on this.
John, it's 25-foot setback from what?
Well, like your house, there should be a 25-foot setback there is what we're recommending.
From my house?
building,
To another building,
no matter what the zone,
building to building.
no matter the zone or or if it's a PUD?
I think residential is what we're discussing.
So that's 25 feet on both sides, that'd be 50 feet?
Yeah, from the corner of the building itself, yes.
So corner of building to corner of building, it's 25 and 25 or 125?
50 feet between
Okay.
building.
Right, that's a lot of feet, but, okay.
I'm not sure, what does this have to do with Conservation Committee between buildings? I thought it was,
It's in the wetland, if it's in the wetland area.
Oh.
That's what we're talking about, the wetland area.
So you're not talking building to building, you're talking 25-foot setback from wetlands.
From the wetlands, from the corner of the building, yes,
Oh.
or out of the building, yes.
Okay,
As far as the culverts thing goes, is that something that you've brought to the select board, or you're just talking about it as a project?
I think we're gonna bring it to the select board because we discussed it in depth and talked with a few other people in town, but I think I should bring it to the select board and have them see if they can't make something happen. Talked to Jim Mayhew about it, but he's got to get the word from I believe the select board. But they're in trouble. There's a lot of culverts that are in trouble here for the drainage. Everything's draining right down to the pond, and it's in trouble.
John, have you talked to I can't remember his name, the guy that's your consultant there?
Rick Vanderpool?
Vanderpool?
Yeah, and have you had any kind of discussions with HEB, which is doing the design of the roads now, regarding the drainage?
No, and that's why we got to get the select board involved and everybody else involved in this. Hopefully we can get some kind of results. But good point, good point.
A question, who specifies the dimension of the culverts that are being placed in the ground on the new lots?
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse.
He's
a good design engineer, I know that guy.
Yeah, the design engineers, I believe, are involved in that. Mark, do you have any comments on that? I believe. Are you still with us?
Mark stepped away.
Okay.
So I recall that one of the things that Rick said was that the culverts toward the bottom of the drainage system from the top of, say, Snows Mountain down to the pond should be increasing in dimension as you decline, down the gradient. And that's not always the case. So we get a culvert at the bottom that's of insufficient diameter will cause a flood around it.
But that's true, Bill, but the other issue, and I walked around some of these with John. An awful lot of the culverts, forget the size, they're just plain blocked. 50% or more of the culvert is now weeds, or whatever you want to call it. So that basically you might have had at one time had a 12-inch culvert, but it's now 6 inches just because it's blocked. So that, the immediate issue, and I understand what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, but the real immediate issue is there is a problem with the culverts being cleaned, and who is responsible other than Terry for going down and cleaning culverts? So there is an issue here. And that's what.
I was told by Jim Mayhew that the town is responsible for doing that, but a lot of it's on private land. So I'm a bit confused on who's responsible. So that's why I was hoping Mark would be around this morning, but I'll talk with Mark later on and privately and see if we can get an answer for that.
Alrighty. Great, thank you, John. Anything further for the Conservation Commission?
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Communications, Nick, was there anything you needed to know about?
Yeah, so Ben Legary came in a couple months ago with that conceptual design. He was in contact with me about potentially showing up to this one with a secondary design because he bought the lot next to the one that he purchased as well. So he now owns 2 lots. But I guess the engineers didn't get the stuff done in time to present that. So most likely he will be coming to the December meeting with a full proposed plan of what he wishes to build on his 2 lots.
So you'd be letting us know if he submits the
Yep.
right forms and so we can review.
Yep.
Nate, is communications, do you want to bring us up to date on the status of a possible cell tower in our neighboring towns?
Before we go there, Mike, I just have a question on the last item. This is just a conceptual review, right?
I do believe so. He hasn't had anything fully put down yet and sent to me. He talked to me. It was at the end of October when he brought up the possibility of coming to this meeting just to show the conceptual design of what he was going to put on the second lot. And then I haven't heard anything from him since. So once he reaches back out, I will let you guys know what he plans to do or what he hopes to do moving forward.
And Nick, just a reminder, when you put something like that on the agenda, it really should have the name, the location, what they're proposing, and what stage relative to what regulations it is. In the past, some of them have just been kind of so-and-so is on the agenda or it's under correspondence, but it really is a step in your application process. It's a conceptual or it's design review. And if they come in with plans done by a surveyor or engineer, you really need to notice that, and it's design review, not a conceptual. So it's often a gray, fuzzy area in between there, but just a reminder to make sure the agenda ties it back to the regulation.
Okay.
Thank you, Tara. All right, Mike, what was your question about?
As far as the cell, as far as the cell tower, I have not received a notice of whether it passed or not.
Okay. But theoretically, we could go out to the Thornton, I guess it's in Thornton, the Thornton website and in the next couple of weeks and figure out what, if anything, they're planning on doing.
I sat through a meeting at Brenda's request, and I think it was the ZBA that was meeting in Thornton, and they decided not to actually comment on the application at that point in time.
I hate to say this, Bill, but what does that mean?
But it means that I don't think they approved anything.
Okay.
That was
So
really,
in other words, it's, nobody knows. We could always put a tower on, at your house, Bill.
Well, so if you wanted, the public hearing that we received was from the town of Lincoln, not Thornton. The one that I brought up last meeting was from the town of Lincoln.
And that will
It's
reach
a
us,
completely different issue.
yeah. Because I thought the issue, was on 49.
Yeah, Thornton.
If Thornton had an application for a cell tower, they were supposed to notify you.
They did.
And,
Yeah, Mark isn't here. I believe they punted.
oh, in other words, they said, we'll worry about it later, okay.
Right, that's my understanding. They came up with some technical reason they weren't gonna answer the question that day.
Okay. I was just curious because I had heard rumors that there was discussion, so.
Okay. So, let's review our calendar here. So Monday, the 23rd, we'll be meeting at 4 o'clock for our special meeting to continue our transient lodging.
I'm sorry,
Sorry. So
my fault.
depending on how things move forward from there, assuming we do our public hearing, that will be Wednesday, December 9th at 6 o'clock. And then our next regularly scheduled meeting, Thursday, December 10th, 8 o'clock.
Thursday, December 10th.
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, you're muted. You're
A couple of
muted.
meetings ago, Tom Myrick stopped by and said that we had an issue with, he believed he had an issue with the fact that the town never went and executed a warrant article and it caused some kind of problem relative to the land. And then my understanding is likewise the town is never actually transferred even River Road, you know, to, even though the warrant article said they were to. What's the resolution of all of these things?
I have to step into something else at 11:15, so I'm just gonna minimize your meeting on my screen and
We won't ask you.
eye on it so I can stop the recording when it looks like you're done.
Okay.
Bill, this is Rich. We've been discussing it at the select board meeting. We've had a couple meetings with town council on this. And I believe we're gonna discuss it again at 3 o'clock. But the issue has been Golden Heights Road and several other roads where the deeds weren't executed that should have been executed. It's not going to really be a major problem. We just need to it's a question of following up on the paperwork that was never followed up on, if I can put it that way. I don't know if Mark is still listening on the matter, but we hope to have it resolved fairly soon.
Mark
Okay.
is not here.
So the select board is on top of it.
Well, okay.
The select board is addressing it.
Okay. A very quick question. I know Tara stepped out, but if this is a conceptual proposal, I think our plate's going to be very full on the 9th and 10th if we go ahead with the transient, the issue of transient issue. Is it necessary? Do we have to agree to have a long proposal on what plans are being conceived for new property? It's precisely in December. I can't wait to January. I just raised that as a question since we're going to have a lot on our plate.
Well, yeah,
Does
it's on
it
the.
depend on what they're planning on doing with construction, if anything?
It's conceptual.
I understand.
Yeah, so, but at this point, I believe we have most of our issues taken care of between the 23rd and the 9th for the transient, which should leave us some more time on the 10th. I'm being optimistic, I guess.
Yes. Okay. I just raised it. I just waited if we think if it didn't matter to the developer. perhaps give us some wiggle room to see if he'd be willing to push it off to January, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think I think if it's conceptual, it'll be all right. My only concern would be if he puts in a full.
Yeah, of course.
larger.
If
And
he-
hopefully, Rich, since we're gonna go and have an open meeting on the 9th, we'll have already resolved all of our issues that we've spent hours and hours on short-term / transient / bed and breakfast /
It'll depend on the public hearing, I suspect.
Yeah.
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 I think it's a fair point because, planning board meetings now are 3 hours.
Now, they always have been. I mean,
It used to be 8.
It would be better if they were 2.
well, yes, it goes without saying. But now it's nothing new. And I think that's why we have a bit of a reputation around town. That's okay. We're
We only meet
thorough.
once a month, so.
Anyway, so on that time note, I would be happy to entertain, if there's nothing else that anyone needs to bring up, I would certainly entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn this meeting.
I'll second it.
Alrighty, and roll call, all in favor, Nancy,
Yes.
Bill Larson,
Yeah.
Wendy, yes, John. John, you're on mute.
John Racine, yes.
Thank you. Rich,
Rich, yes.
Bill Spence,
I think so.
Terry,
Yes.
excellent. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
See
See
you
you all
all.
next time.
Yeah.
Bye.